All right, we're live. That's it.
Yay!
Hey, finally live. After a few technical things, I'm Scarlett Johnson, and I am here with my friend Luka Hein.
Hello.
You want to give your Twitter handle really fast?
Yeah, so my Twitter is one done bun with the one spelled out, like the word.
That's um, yeah. I just came from shopping with my daughter, getting her homecoming dress. So we were trying to go on earlier, and if you hear a baby crying in the background, that's my grandson who is being watched by his three aunts, my three daughters, all like my 11-year-old, my 14-year-old, and my 17-year-old. So they're watching the baby with grandpa while I'm doing this. um, so what's going on with you briefly, and then I brought you on to I wanted to talk, and I also wanted to go over the things that I went through yesterday
hmm
in Madison, Wisconsin. There's so far I think 23 states have passed legislation to
hmm
protect women's sports and girls sports, and I think it's 23 states that have also passed legislation that would ban gender affirming care, they call it.
hmm
Some will call it gender mutilations, surgery. I tend to say either sex change drugs and
hmm
surgeries, or transition drugs or surgeries for minors.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that Wisconsin, we have a Democrat as a governor, Tony Evers, but we do
hmm
have control of the two houses. We have a majority, the GOP, by we, more conservative. There's a Republican majority in the state Senate, 60, so that is a veto-proof majority, and in the
hmm
Assembly, we are too shy of a veto-proof majority. So
mm
while we have control, if these bills are passed, Governor Evers came to the Capitol into the overflow rooms and promised that he was going to veto them. But
hmm
we still we the you know I still feel like this is legislation that we want to fight for, that we want to
hmm
pass,
Yeah.
and you never know, could you bring a few people over, maybe, but it's just really important to make that statement and to do everything we can to fight for kids.
hmm
So I know you've testified before. So what? First of all, Luca, why don't you tell a little bit of your story? Because I assume like that
Okay.
everyone knows you, and I think you should. And it's a little later. I'm going to repost this in the afternoon tomorrow, so that
hmm
should be more views. But let everyone know who you are first.
Yeah, so my name is Luka Hein, and I fall under what is considered a detransitioner. So I went through the, quote unquote, gender affirming care process when I was a minor. The very first medical intervention I ever had was a double mastectomy at 16 before I was on hormones or anything else. And I am now 21 and I have since detransitioned. Um, and I kind of I'll probably live with, to some extent for the rest of my life, the health impacts that transitioning at such a young age cause, including stuff like, joint pain, vocal cord pain, weird heart issues, a lot of like pelvic pain due to issues with like my reproductive system not wanting to restart essentially like it should.
Yeah.
And that's a more recent one that has been um, like debilitating. But
Oh,
I will live with this essentially for probably the rest of my life, and I really don't think it is ever a place for a child. There's no age appropriate way to explain to a child what it means to lose some of the things you lose when you go through a transition. Um,
no.
I could not consent to it just with where I was developmentally at 16. Um, And yeah, that's a little bit about my story. I shared stuff on Twitter about a year ago now, going over like just how I was feeling. It was just a little kind of video diary almost I put out just in case it would help someone, and then it kind of blew up a little bit and ended with me like
Where did you post the video diary?
so it's on Twitter. It's like if you go way back to the very like my first or second post on Twitter,
Okay.
it's like a set of I think 5 videos, and they're all about a minute long because it was before it got to where you could upload longer segments to Twitter.
Oh yeah, I remember when it used to. It would be very, very difficult. You had to do very short videos, and and you could not go over. So yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, so they're all each clip is like a minute 15.
So you got some attention when you posted those.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've just been kind of talking about my experience and sharing a bit about like my journey of also detransitioning, because when I posted those, I had like essentially just within the past month there stopped testosterone when I posted those. And so it has been like kind of just following my journey along on Twitter.
Yeah. Have there been changes? So how long? That was a year ago. So what changes? Just I think to explain, so you stopped, when did you stop kind of taking any of the cross-sex hormones?
So for reference here, I was on them for 4 years. So I started when I was 16 and I stopped around like mid-September-ish of last year. So it's essentially been a little bit like past a full year now that I've been off of them. And, there's definitely... I would say probably one of the biggest changes I've noticed is I don't have like constant acne anymore. And I know right now I'm breaking out for other reasons because I was camping all last weekend and just dealing with like the aftermath of it.
Was that a side effect of taking the testosterone?
It is I had really bad, for me at least, like acne that just hurt, like where it was under your skin and it just hurt. And my skin was always like dry and oily. And even like the texture of my hands felt different. When I would touch.
I've never read about that. So that's hard as a teenager, and that's something that hasn't been discussed. So that's just an effect of all of the testosterone.
Yeah. And then since stopping testosterone, I have basically gone through essentially menopause at like 2021 now, where all last fall I was dealing with the worst parts of that, where it was like constant, I was dizzy, nauseous, hot flashes, just like a general stuff as like a symptom of menopause. And I was dealing with that really bad all last fall, in the course of a month last fall, early winter, like from the time I went home for Thanksgiving to the time I went home for Christmas. And I only know this because like I weighed myself both times. I dropped 20 pounds, and I am not a human that just has that weight to just like.
Yes, you're thin. I've met you in person. You're very thin, and you're taller too. So that's you must have been. So why just because do you gain more weight when you're on testosterone?
You do, because it makes you, since it's a steroid, you build more muscle, but also it makes you really hungry. That's just like I don't know where that falls in, like whether that's a mental or a physical thing, but it does. That is like something that people report. It makes you a lot more hungry than you would be, normally.
I have a son, and when he was a teenager, that's one thing that you say about boys when they're going through puberty. That's just sort of, they're so hungry, they'll eat a lot. So maybe that I'm not a doctor, but I'm guessing that's where that kind of comes from, that that kind of like appetite. There was something I heard a lot yesterday, and it was new for me. I had never heard this before. So the first time I heard it, I almost laughed. but I was in Madison from very early in the morning till about 5 o'clock, and then I had to come home, and then I watched. We have something called Wisci, so I could watch the rest of it on that virtually, and repeatedly the transgender, either the kids, the teenagers, even the adults, they kept talking about going through two puberties. I didn't understand that at first, because they said I went through the wrong puberty or two puberty. So is that what they mean? Like they went through puberty and then,
except it's not puberty. It is essentially pumping yourself full of a steroid and then getting chemically induced menopause as a result of that.
yeah.
It's not puberty. You're not going through these same stages. You are going through, essentially, if you're female and you're taking testosterone, you're going through chemically induced menopause, and then you're just pumping yourself full of steroid on top of that. Because it doesn't, you don't get the like healthy side of things. Essentially, your body is still going to actively try and fight against this in the end, because you are doing damage to it. And I mean, we do know what like long-term steroid use essentially does to females, because you look at female bodybuilders who cycled on steroids, and the damage and side effects they deal with.
Yeah.
And then you realize that, like, hey, this is something that doctors do know about, but then when you try and put it in terms of the trans issue, all of a sudden they have like amnesia about what this does to the female body.
I'm going to play you some video, because you have to. I really want to get your. I really want to get your information. I'm actually looking, because I know you sent me your testimony, and I actually want to see if I can pull up what you sent me. And because I would like, it would be interesting. I want to play that while we're talking, but so. I would maybe a little bit. There's so much about your journey that I think, and I actually used your testimony when I spoke. I read your testimony because I was going to use my own. I wrote up my own testimony, and I thought I'll submit this because I had heard one after another, one kid after another, and one adult after another. More so adults saying that they had transitioned. And when questioned, well, don't you understand? We're just trying to prevent minors from transitioning, before they're making these permanent decisions. They said, well, I wish that I had this. I wish I had this ability when I was younger.
It is looking back.
They thought I'd be so much happier.
It is looking back at the past with essentially rose-colored glasses, thinking, well, if I did this so much earlier, then I would have been better off. And they are living vicariously through the fact that other kids will go through this. For some of these adults, it is not about them genuinely, caring about the quality of care or anything these kids are going through. It is them living vicariously through, well, I didn't get to do this at this age, so this kid's going to do it at this age, essentially. Despite the fact that, like, we know that going through puberty eases a lot of like childhood gender dysphoria. We know that growing up and just becoming used to your body and kind of like growing into it almost, it resolves the majority of cases. Yet you still have adults that have suffered, and they're looking back on every single thing and overanalyzing their childhood, kind of looking at it through these rose-tinted glasses of just, well, if I would have had that, I would have been so much happier today. They are relying on that past vision to think that it would make them happier today, and that is going to actively harm children.
Yeah, and they continually said, I was so depressed as a kid. I struggled with anxiety, depression, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, very vulnerable. And I thought, and then they said, and I couldn't figure out what was wrong in my whole life. And I was married and divorced, and it was just really hard. My heart went out to them. And then they said, and then I discovered I was transgender, and I was.
And then I found God. Is essentially a very similar sentiment.
And this is what I having been raised as a child in an evangelical church.
Mm-hmm.
This sound to me, this was like a tent revival where everyone was coming in to tell how they were saved.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like that. It was so, and everyone's like, it was just so much like I was broken, because that's what happens. People come up and testify. I was broken. I was an alcoholic. And then I found Jesus, and then I found God. And for them, it's like, and then I found not puberty blockers, but then I found cross-sex hormones. And then then my life changed. I've never been happier in my whole life. I heard
Mm-hmm.
that, but they didn't look happy. They didn't sound happy.
For the people that talk the most about how content and happy they are, they sure do always look outright miserable. And I say that as someone who's stuck in bed some days because my joints hurt so bad. And I don't even look that miserable when I'm dealing with that. It really is, I feel like the entire concept of what used to be considered just transsexualism, what it has been kind of captured by gender ideology. And at this point, it really can be considered an ideology because it fits the description of essentially a non-theistic religion. So there is no central God or anything, but it does fall under what I would consider, an ideology in the terms of like, and you find out pretty quick once you break ranks and become a heretic in any way, you find out pretty quickly how they treat you. And it is very similar to how certain religions treat people who start to question things or start to, denounce the faith, essentially.
And I was just looking, and I think I found, I'm going to play the video.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
You also have, when they talk about how much happier they are, like the terms of like, oh, well, we know this works. The bar is so low for it working. The bar is, oh, you didn't kill yourself. That is not a accurate description of satisfaction and quality care. The bar is on the ground, and some of these people decided to grab a shovel and start digging under it because of how low it is to try and defend this care.
Yeah, they saved my life. There was one person who was like, it saved my life, it saved my life, it saved my life. I mean, I have to say this because it's just the truth.
Mm-hmm.
I saw so much brokenness and so much what I feel is mental illness. A lot of people that really needed quality
comorbidities there.
Psychotherapy that they would have been, and and probably the saddest part were how many children that were androgynous, because they're younger. You really were trying to, are you a boy or girl? Because the haircuts were short, the clothing was like not female or male, but most of the time you felt like that's. But then when looking up close, well, okay, that's a little girl that's kind of dressed like a boy. That's a little boy dressed like a girl. From behind, I would see, this tall blonde and tall thin blonde, and think, oh, and then they turn around, and yeah, it's a man. And just everywhere it was, also very cosplay. There was like a cosplay aspect to it, like it's not dressing like a man, like just your everyday, like my husband would, but in a more exaggerated way, and not dressing the way a woman would typically dress, but in a more exaggerated way. Now, that wasn't everybody. There were, but that was something I saw a lot, and it's there. They did. I mean, this was Madison. We're right by the UW campus, so
there you go.
There were 2 or 3 overflow rooms, and then when I looked at Twitter or X today, I searched. I saw that Planned Parenthood had organized, that the ACLU Wisconsin had organized and brought people there.
I saw their little printed out posters that they have for every single state.
Yeah, and they were blue shirts. They were blue shirts. So then I realized, because I was so busy getting prepared and trying to get some of our folks there, we had very short notice, and the people that I would like to be their work. They have jobs,
Mhm.
and they have
That
kids.
is the thing, is the people that can come to
Hard.
this kind of stuff where you have these huge groups, they're either students or they are unemployed. Like, because
Yep.
these people have so much time on their
Or
hand
they
to
live
organize
close
something
by.
that big.
And you know what? I have to say this though.
Mhm.
They really prioritize this. And when I was a little feeling bummed yesterday, I said this, and I feel better today. But I really wished that we could have had uh, more people there. Not because there was such an opportunity. There were so many young people there, and if we could have had um, and this is why we're going to try and organize better when this comes to the Senate. Just
Mhm.
have some detransitioners there talk, and have some doctors and nurses,
Mhm.
and that presence, so that maybe planting some kind of seed. Maybe they couldn't hear it now, but some kind of seed that this isn't the truth. I believe that you believe this. It's
Mhm.
just not the truth.
Yeah. I was trying to find something that I liked earlier on on Twitter, and it was something along the lines of like, if there was no hope for our cause, their propaganda would not be necessary.
Yes, that's
If there
a
was no hope,
really,
the propaganda would not be necessary.
yeah. Um, I I am going to, I'm not going to share the screen, well, I'm sharing the screen. So I'm going to find the video. Then I'm
Mhm.
going to show you this video. Now this one that I just posted, which is great. But I'm going to here's some images of you on
Yeah.
your Twitter, like then 2019
Yes.
now, and you look so pretty. You look great.
Me in my pajamas, which
So
habit to get out of posting on Twitter.
here's
Mentally
the
ill
video.
teenager who had
Yeah.
been groomed and preyed upon and sexually exploited online to the point of authorities getting involved. I spiraled into a hatred of myself and my body and was told that it was just because I was a boy born in the wrong body and that this would fix me. I was affirmed down a path where I wasn't given any other choice as to what would help me. The very first medical intervention I ever had was a double mastectomy at 16. And then a few months later, I was put on testosterone. I'm now 21, and I will live with the impacts of that so-called care for the rest of my life. In the past 4 or 5 months, I have watched as my body has fallen apart in front of me, my joints constantly hurting, my vocal cords aching, watching as parts of me atrophy away before my very eyes. And yet at 16, they looked me in the eyes and they told me this was care. They told me it would save me. Despite the fact I was never suicidal, my parents were baited with the idea of, would you rather have a dead daughter or a living son? Bullied into going along with it. Their biggest crime being trusting those who they thought took an oath to do no harm. It's not about hate detransitioning. It never has been. It's about keeping kids whole. I've worked with children. I've seen them explore the world, and I've seen that magic that they have. And doing something like transitioning them takes that away. How can you look me in the eyes and tell me that a child can consent to being changed to an experimental medical industry before they're even old enough to drive or understand the impacts of what that means in the first place? Kids deserve to be kids. They deserve to get to explore the world as a safe and loving place.
That was beautiful. That's really good. So what do you think? Is that the message when have you talked to groups? Do is that kind of the message that you're trying to share?
That is essentially. So I think I mentioned to you when I gave you my testimony that I don't read off of anything when I go talk to these places. I just kind of start rambling for as long as they'll let me.
That sounds like
Um,
you do that sometimes.
but I that is essentially the message, because it's one of those things where the goal is essentially, I do not want any other child to have to go through what I did, to have, the confusion and the pain and the trauma I was going through at that time twisted in a way that turned me against my very like body I am, you know.
Yeah.
And almost prying apart that disconnect between my mind and my body even more, instead of working to rejoin those like what should have happened. And
Go ahead, keep going.
And I was gonna say, and I mean it. I've worked with children in various different capacities, and it is just one of those things where you see them. They have this. They really have this hope and really this magic that they have in them when they interact with the world, in a way that having to think so critically of yourself in the way that gender ideology demands, that just kills that light. And you were talking about seeing like miserable people there yesterday. It kills that light. And relighting that spark is very, very hard after it has gone out. And it is the saddest thing to me to see small children being dragged into this specifically too.
I can't, what you're saying is exactly what I saw. I didn't, and maybe what I even felt. It's hard for me to be in the room as folks were testifying. After a while, it was so much, it just, I guess it's hard for me to put into words, especially with the kids. And then there were kids all on the floor, and some of them sometimes they were crying, or they were just. And when somebody came up to speak and maybe said, you weren't born in the wrong body, they're just shaking their head like, no, like.
That's what I cannot imagine. Why you would want to be the adult in the room that looks at this kid and looks them in the eyes and say, everything about you and how you were born is wrong. Everything is broken, and I'm going to fix it if you just let me take you to these doctors. Why would you be the adult? You talk about not wanting to be your child's first bully. Why would you look your child in the eyes and tell them that everything about them, every insecurity they have about their growing body, about how they socialize, about their interests? Why would you look them in the eyes, and why would you be the adult to tell them, yes, you are correct, everything is wrong with you? What do you think that does to a child's self-esteem? What do you think that does to their sense of self and developing? You are tearing them down the minute you agree that everything about them, from their mind to their body to how they were born, is incorrect.
I don't even know. I don't know. I try to think about, as a kid, having that as an option, as a 9-year-old or 10-year-old, because I was a tomboy. I can't even imagine, having that planted in your head that maybe you like cars more, or if you like to play G.I. Joe with your brothers, that might mean these kind of gender stereotypical things. That might mean that you're a boy. But I think for the most part, especially when they're young, you're dealing with kids who are autistic, and they see things in a whole different way. It's very black and white. And then also kids that can have struggles with anxiety and depression. I just want to say, Kit Hart, my friend Kit Hart, she is with Moms for Liberty, and she's driving. She's
Ironically, well, thank you so much for having me on. And Luka, your testimony, Scarlett sent it to me. It was phenomenal, and I just wanted to say, we need more courageous young people like you. It's so heartening and encouraging to see people like you stand up. So thank you so much for your courage and your bravery. I'm ironically driving home from a forum, a gender ideology forum that was hosted in the county next to me, which was wonderful. And basically, I mean, they got all kinds of people together from all over the state, and it still shocks me every time I go to one of these things about how many people just are so unaware of what's happening. I think because, Scarlett, especially you and I are so entrenched in this world, and we give, you know, so much of our time to it. We dedicate our lives to it. But the general public is so unaware of what's happening to our kids in our schools. And one thing that really resonated with me today was the fact that gender ideology and gender theory, that's and confusion that children face when they decide that they are of the wrong gender. That's the only child self-diagnosed condition does a child ever say that that adults around them affirm.
Yes.
That is.
Oh, we're having a little.
Oh no.
We're having some trouble hearing you right now. I think you went through can you restate what you said? We didn't hear that. Oh, here. She can come back in.
One thing she did mention though is that people are so unaware of it, partially because, you know, this is a headache-inducing topic to try and like get yourself into, but also just because it sounds so completely bonkers that, like, if a child came up and told you that this was what was going on, you'd think they were just having like a big imaginative moment. Like, it sounds so insane that to your normal person, they're going to be like, what do you mean? There's no way you're telling the truth. I've seen it compared to, there's a scene in Matilda where the principal like swings a girl around by her braids, and when the kids go home and tell their parents, the parents don't believe it because it sounds too insane to be true. That is essentially what we're dealing with like gender ideology. Is they'll be like, well, no one's giving surgery to kids. That sounds insane. They would never do that. Like, just trying to explain it. It sounds too insane to be true, and then you realize it is happening, and that is the horrifying realization.
You know what was really, because what was, and I'm going to be posting a lot more clips. So the bill is AB 465 in Wisconsin. And what I found odd is that people were fighting really hard for something that supposedly doesn't exist, or it rarely happens.
That is the thing. It never happens. And then it goes to, it rarely happens. And then it goes to, it's a good thing and it should be happening more. Because it's like, I don't know if I want to bring this up. I had one of my senators go, no, this never happens in Nebraska anyway. And then it's like, okay, then why can't we ban it if it never happens? If it never happens, why are you so opposed to us legislating this thing that never happens? Your biggest complaint should be then, well, if it's not happening, it's a useless piece of legislation. But no, you defend it because you know it's happening and you think it's a good thing deep down if you're defending it. Because if it wasn't happening, then why can't you just put a piece of legislature in place saying, no, this will not and will not ever happen?
And you know, want to know one other thing that, and I'm going to find this clip and post it. The question was asked, basically a limiting principle. At what point should you, where would you say, where's the legal line give kids puberty blockers or hormones? They could not give us an age. 1-year-old, 2-year-old. They wouldn't. They refused. It's just like the question, what is a woman? When they won't answer it, they're afraid to answer it. They're afraid to put any line in the sand. These politicians, and they're mostly Democrats. That's really scary that you're too afraid of the activists that kind of control. You're too afraid of them to say, no, as an infant, we will not affirm you. They couldn't do that.
Well,
they couldn't say, okay,
a good
of
way,
course.
another way to phrase that question is, okay, at what age do you feel a child can consent to having all of their future sexual function destroyed? Like, at what age do you think a child can fully comprehend that? Because I'll give you a hint, there is no age-appropriate way to explain that to a child. There isn't.
They'll try. It's not happening, but it is.
They will try, but here's the thing. Just cognitive development-wise, a child cannot understand. And I know I sure couldn't, and I was 16, and they're trying to do this like 12-year-olds. Like they cannot they're not, teenagers and children are not known for long-term decision-making and thinking things through all the way like that. I think that is like a universal, we know that pretty well. And it's just one of those things where it's like, okay, so we know in every other aspect of life that this age of individual is not good at, like long-term decision-making or not being impulsive or anything like this. Why is it different when it comes to completely sterilizing and destroying their bodily functions all of a sudden? Like if I was,
you can agree to that. Oh, hold on. I can't. The sound is.
Oh my God. Can you guys hear me now?
We can hear you.
Very quiet.
Darn, because I had something very quiet.
Very quiet.
Scarlett knows me. Scarlett knows me. I'm not usually very quiet.
It's like something's not connected. Are you on?
Okay. I might have to get out because
Yeah, why don't you reconnect?
But I'll watch it.
Yeah, if you can reconnect. You have the link. The link hasn't changed. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, just reconnect. So yeah, we're just momming this. So you can tell this isn't Tim Pool here. We're not the Joe Rogan show. I wish. But yeah, this is before they were famous. But still getting pretty good amount of views. So I had one of my friends text me, Scarlett, you have to send out notifications. Luka's a great guest to have on. And I'm like, I know, I'll get better. You'll come back, right, Luka? You'll come back. I'll get better at this. And
I wanted to. I was so tempted to like get up at like 5 this morning and drive over to Wisconsin, but unfortunately it just didn't happen. So whenever it goes through your other house, your other like branch will go through, I'll come over.
You'll have another opportunity because that was the assembly bill. It will have a hearing at the Senate. They're going to vote on the bill next week, I believe. And then I believe, knock on wood, if it will pass. So please, everyone, if anyone listening, just
finding all the weird things within my reach.
Oh yeah. We got a lot of people couldn't either, but we had a lot of folks send in their written testimony. Here's several doctors, and I read some of this, and there was some really good. So one thing that was really interesting, one doctor had said, because there's another bill, AB 372, and then there was, I believe it was AB 378. And so one of these were about saving girls' sports in K through 12, and another was in college. And Paula Scantic came and spoke. And I'm going to post her testimony tomorrow. They were vicious. And I know, Luka, they have been particularly vicious with you. And you would think that, and it was honestly mostly the women, like the more left-leaning women, they were very tough, mocking, haughty, condescending. It was to me, you don't need to treat people that way just because you don't agree with them.
I had one of my state senators, two of them in the committee were particularly bad. One had just the meanest look on her face and was ignoring everything I said, scrolling on her laptop, which ironically had a big "Be Kind" sticker on the back, while just making the most like grumpy looking face. And the other one, who was just making like a stink face at me the entire time, is the one from Nebraska who had the video going around where she was just going bonkers in the unicamera going, "We love trans people, that one."
I have to put that, I gotta find that. I've got to find that.
Yeah, that one is one of the ones I got to testify in front of, and she was not giving me a very nice look the entire time. The Be Kind Brigade is nice in name only.
Yep.
And then you disagree and they're pretty mean. I think I shared with you the one clip from me in Indiana where I was like legitimately mad because one of their female like senators made the other detransitioner who testified right before me, they made her cry. And it set off some like primal rage in me that I don't think I have felt, that I felt like tearing into them with every word in a way that I had never done before. Just because this other detransitioner, her name is Prisha, and she's so incredibly sweet and just wants to help people. And they made her cry, and I think that is the closest I have ever been to going like mama bear mode on someone.
Oh my gosh. No, it's why would they do that? These are vulnerable. They should be caring about like the quote vulnerable.
Detransitioners are the trans kids they promised to protect.
Right.
Yeah,
that's true.
Now we can hear you, Kurt.
Okay,
Perfectly.
I wanted to ask you. So, I saw a post by a trans activist, and it said, I was so angry, and I didn't really know, and maybe you can help me out with how to respond to something like this. It said, don't allow detransitioners to take away, to argue against trans people. That just because they detransition doesn't mean they're not still trans. So how would you respond to that? I mean, because what she was saying was they're not, they're saying they're no longer trans, but they're just confused. They're still trans.
Is this they're still trans at heart lady?
So, I mean, and this.
Still trans. I've never heard of that.
Okay, wait, hang on. Is this on Twitter?
So that's what. That's on Twitter. I believe it was Dr.
I replied to that, and I can read you what I replied.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, let me find it. It's rather recent in my.
Yeah, I think I just saw it yesterday.
Yeah. So it was I replied to something else, but I saw that, and I think I just said, "Stop lying about us." My health has been destroyed. And there were, I think pretty much any detransitioner I know responded to that post saying, "We aren't still trans at heart. We don't want to be part of your club. Stop saying that. We're in pain. Our health is destroyed. We were sold a lie, and you need to take some accountability for being the medical professionals that pushed us down a path like that."
Good for you.
But no, I responded on another one because this same individual was like, "I believe 100% that I'm in the right because that's what my heart of hearts said." And I just said, "Adults affirming my gender led to being 21 with joint and pelvic pain so bad I can't get out of bed and no breasts. Does your heart of hearts give a shit about that, or are those of us harmed just collateral damage so you don't have to think about anything besides your ego?"
Right. Oh, good for you. That's phenomenal. I saw that too, and I was like, I'm pretty sure that science overrides your heart of hearts. I mean, come on. You're going to use your heart as a crutch for what you want to do to kids? That's evil.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's one of those things where if you're a medical professional,
reasonable.
If you're a medical professional, how are you going to say you are 100% certain in something when that's really not how like scientific stuff goes? Science is always, changing, and that's how we're getting to the point where like the countries are pulling back on gender affirming care over in Europe. But like, how are you going to sit there and tell me that you are not an activist when you use phrases like, in my heart of hearts, I know I am 100% correct?
Right.
Like,
Well,
not even like.
Go ahead. There was a therapist who said, and I quote, you know what? You don't always need peer-reviewed studies. Why are we having this you don't need peer-reviewed studies to pass legislation. So why are you saying that we need peer-reviewed? Seriously, we don't need peer-reviewed studies. That's silly. I'm like that. And the funny thing is I promise you that that same guy is going to come testify about something and he'll say, look at all the peer-reviewed studies.
Oh, it is always look at all these studies, and then they pull up the most like low quality evidence, sketchy, like sketchily done studies with no real like solid standing. They're all very low quality evidence. And they'll say, look at all these studies. And then the minute you pull out anything else, they go, well, why do we need studies? Who was talking about studies? We don't need any studies. What do you mean?
Well, I will say I somewhat agree with the fact that you don't need a whole lot of peer-reviewed studies to say that a boy cannot become a girl and vice versa.
This is going to shock you. This is going to shock you, but I don't need a peer-reviewed study to tell me that sterilizing vulnerable children is wrong. I know that is just like the take of the century right there. Sterilizing vulnerable kids and cutting off their body parts is wrong.
Yep.
I don't need a peer-reviewed study to tell me it is like objectively wrong. Don't chop up confused vulnerable kids.
Yeah, isn't it interesting? It's just that at 1 minute they'll say, because if you say, well, okay, could you show me a study that guarantees that this is safe? There's nothing, just give me something. Well, we don't need that. We don't, because there are peer-reviewed studies, and all of them, because there are countries that have been doing this for 20 years. The Dutch protocol.
There's the systematic reviews too.
Where these
a lot of their studies are also, well, we asked these like small group of kids that are still deeply ingrained in this being what they want, how they felt about it, and they said they're fine with it. A lot of these studies also are very much still they're either like retroactively looking back at patient data, which, fun fact, most detransitioners do not go back to the doctor that transitioned them to tell them what's going on. So, in the eyes of these kinds of studies, they're still a happy transitioner because they never went back and reported that something was wrong.
Go ahead.
Or you have studies that fall way below the average window for when people detransition. I believe it was on average, it's like 7 to 10 years after transitioning that people start to detransition, and that's just like something I've seen thrown around from the few like insights we have about it. But
so that's a question that I have. So there, oftentimes, and I had just read this, when someone desists, when they decide that they're going to stop taking the cross-sex hormones, that oftentimes they just stop going. So they don't go to their prescribing doctor and say, I'm done.
I can tell you why they don't.
Why?
So I am one of the few detransitioners who went back to my original doctor and tried to like lay everything out. And so I had a Zoom call with her, and I laid out everything. I'm like, hey, my joints hurt so bad. I can't move. I can't do stuff. I don't believe I could consent to this when I was that young with everything going on. And I kind of laid everything out. I wasn't like accusatory or anything. I was just like, hey, this is what's going on, because some part of me was still like, okay, maybe they'll help me. And I got told that this is just the next step in my gender journey. And not given any real help. I didn't feel, there wasn't that overwhelming like tidal wave of unconditional support that comes with when you say you're trans. It just
So
was
no-
a slight look of panic on her face on the Zoom call, no real help. And then, I had to pay $200 for the Zoom call. And that was what happened when I went back to this doctor that transitioned me as a child.
So all and all of the oh, this is wonderful, this is great. That sort of that changed. There wasn't that compassion, concern. Okay, well, how can I help you? Do you think there's a lot of reasons why, but as of I want to talk about, because you did file a lawsuit, but because these are not FDA approved drugs to be used for what they're being used for right now. They haven't been sued, so they've been able to do all of these things because kids sign. Is that what happened with you? Did you have to sign anything that said that I understand? Maybe they tell you anything?
So I have a little piece of paper, and in a minute here, I might be able to go find it, possibly. I think it might be on my bookshelf, maybe. But it was a piece of paper that went through, it was a chart. It said effect, when it will start, when it will when it's at its peak, or will essentially when it's reached its maximum, this is about how it's going to be. And then it gave a little thing that said if it is permanent or not. Now, the thing with that is a lot of pretty much every problem health-wise that I'm experiencing was not on that chart. Joint pain and complete pelvic floor disruption and atrophy and just all this stuff that I deal with was not on that chart. And it's one of those things where it's even then, I don't think a 16-year-old can consent to the possibility of infertility, maybe outside of what would be legitimate life-saving situation like cancer or for some reason emergency surgery, stuff that is, they toss around life-saving a lot, but stuff that would be legitimately life-saving, physically this needs to happen. I don't think a 16-year-old can consent to infertility. No. And of course at 16, of course he was I don't want kids. I was 16. I think it would have been more abnormal if a 16-year-old was sitting there being yeah, I do want to have kids right now, immediately. The society would have been what is wrong with you? But a 16-year-old says they don't have kids, and we're now trusting that they're going to believe that forever, and completely destroying their sexual function because of it.
It's immoral. It's ungodly. It's to take away sexual function, take away children. But to say to somebody who has never had and this is true. Now, the younger and younger that they start this process, Jazz Jennings, they've never had a boyfriend or girlfriend. They've never been in a relationship. So how possibly? They don't know what they're missing yet. They don't have any clue.
They don't. And it's one of those things where you haven't even been in a serious relationship. You're a teenager. You haven't been in a serious relationship. You don't know what that means or what that entails really at 16. At least not relationship in the terms that we think of it, when you're an adult and what the relationship entails. But just
they're just too little. And that's what I titled this, They're Coming for Your Children, because what I realized, the whole agenda, because what were we asking? We weren't asking to ban the surgeries altogether. It was for young children. And that was something they could not accept. And I realized more and more that they want to give these drugs to kids younger because they want to stop secondary sex characteristics that would happen during puberty. I just wanted to play one video real fast, another one, because this is, you need to see this.
Oh, I wonder if I know which one it is that I've seen circulating around. I haven't watched it. I didn't watch any of the Wisconsin stuff. But I'm wondering if it's gonna be why. I think you're on mute.
First, I think, and my understanding they are reversible, but I'd like to see more data on that actually. But anyway, one of the things that blocker stops is getting the deep voice. I'm stuck with this deep voice, and I think the blockers would have stopped that. And if you take them off the blockers, you can get. Another thing I have is like the Adam's apple, facial hair.
Time is up.
Bud, you're not special.
I spent $5,000 trying to have my facial hair removed through electrolysis, and only half of it's gone. And then the most important thing is I had facial feminization surgery, and I paid that out of my own pocket. That was $25,000. I mean, my point is the blockers can prevent having to be forced to, and it caused a lot of stress for me today having these, but there were some solutions. Standards are very well done, and I'm assuming the same standards I had to go through are applied to the kids. And then lastly, I want to talk something really interesting, and that's if you don't, I would have loved to go on the blockers. I want to just tell you really quickly what happens if you don't go on blockers.
You know, it's one of those things where, like I said, you like to think that some of this is coming from an actual place of care, and then you think about, well, no, all this person has talked about is their like what they had to go through an adult, and wishing that they didn't have to do that. Like, look at, I spent all this money on plastic surgery. I had to pay for that out of my own pocket. What, like excuse, okay, and as a result, you're not dealing with the, brain swelling, vision loss, and bone loss that puberty blockers cause.
So do you think that there's more damage from the puberty blockers?
So here's the thing, and I was never on blockers, but I will say they are definitely, they have their own set of very scary side effects. And I'm going to be here. The scariest one is just that you cannot get that growth, like the time frame for growth, because humans develop, and there are very specific times that certain things have to happen. I feel like anyone who has kids knows this, that like there are certain milestones that you are supposed to hit at certain times in your life. You're never going to get that time back if you pause that. They're like, oh, they'll resume puberty whenever they get off it. There will be some things that they have completely missed, not to mention the mental development that may not be there because you essentially put their body into chemical limbo.
That's good.
For a few years. And there's that. But then the almost more dangerous aspect of it is that blockers are just a gateway to cross-sex hormones. And when I've talked about it, I've said surgery damaged one part of me. Cross-sex hormones did everything else. Like,
okay, they're pretty powerful, right?
They are. They are in their own ways too. Like depending on which one you're taking. Testosterone is extremely powerful. And it's like I said, it's one of those things where okay, surgery removed my breast. That is one part of me. That is what it damaged. Cross-sex hormones have damaged the entire rest of my body, from my endocrine system to my heart, to my joints, to my bones, to my muscles. It has to my vocal cords, to my skin. It has damaged everything else. And you see them act like those are nowhere near as bad.
Do you think that they're not being truthful because they don't talk about this? It's happy-go-lucky. I'm like skipping to work every day. This is the best.
The trans community actively plays down any negative side effects that people experience, even from those who aren't detransitioners, but just like are having health problems and still identify as trans. They actively downplay or outright silence people who have these problems, especially in online communities. They will say, well, that's just your experience. You're scaring people by talking about that topic.
Do they talk about that amongst themselves? Is this something where they think like, we can't talk about this out loud because then we won't be able to get, then they'll ban or all those.
I don't think it's necessarily a conscious effort to like silence those people. I think some of it is just outright, it causes a little thought in the back of their mind that maybe they don't like very well. And I feel like that's what part of their big issue with detransitioners, because here's the thing, the old school transsexuals who are like, have been transitioned for years, you know what they're not bothered by? Detransitioners. You look at people, just to bring up some examples, like specifically the transsexuals who are like, want to help the detransitioners. And think of them what you will. I know everyone has some opinion on that topic, but they are notably have a different attitude towards the people who are harmed by gender medicine than the people who will screech at you for even mentioning your detransition and tell you you're killing people by just talking about it. Like that person who says that is not secure in their sense of self.
Yeah.
That is not a person who is happy and secure in their sense of self. Yeah. If the mere presence of a detransitioner somewhere sets you into like a frenzy.
It does, man. Does that happen? I mean, it's happened to you. Like when you testify, it's just like when Paula Scanton came or Riley Gaines, when they come and talk about, because they want to say no one's ever had a bad experience. And when I testify,
it happen is the
I remember just yesterday when I started to say, I can tell you the story. There's a high school in Green Bay, Wisconsin, where there's a biological boy that's on the girls volleyball team. He was able to try out this, and then he was able to get that spot. And a lot of girls were upset. A lot of girls quit the team. A lot of girls got injuries. A lot of girls welts and bruises and didn't want to go into the locker rooms and shower rooms with a biological boy with, an intact penis. They didn't want to do it. And the parents complained and they tried to stop it and they couldn't. And so when it was very quiet, no one had any questions for me when I said, because it took me about an hour and a half before I could finally speak. Where's a problem? There's no problem. This isn't happening. And then as soon as it is happening.
They say that so much to the point where it's almost like a meme-worthy line online at this point, where it's, that thing that doesn't happen appears to have happened again.
Yeah. Yep. And so they said, well, there's only six transgender athletes playing on girls' teams in Wisconsin.
Cool. So then what's the big deal making them switch to play with their biological sex if there's 6 of them?
Well, and you know what? And I said, and my point was, I'm not willing to risk even one girl getting an injury, one girl losing an opportunity.
Yeah, exactly.
Not one. And if look at the 4,000% increase. Now, grant you, this is mainly females, but I've just read that there's data showing that now there are more boys that are identifying as girls. Is the more that we kind of plant these seeds in kids, and that's what comprehensive sexuality education is doing. It is planting these seeds in kids' mind. And now I realize why, because they believe that if they can get at the kids younger, they can pass.
It is about the fact, and some of the parents who have put their kids on puberty blockers will admit this, it's about the fact that they want their kid to fit into societally accepted beauty standards. It is not about the kid's health, really. It is about the fact that they want their kid to, I believe one mom even used the word hot when describing her female child who was on blockers and testosterone.
Yep.
It is so weird. That you would be able to sacrifice your child's physical health by putting them on stuff before they are done growing and can understand, like, comprehend what they're doing for the sake of them looking aesthetically pleasing.
They want them to look like a girl or boy. They want them to pass. And hey, if I do it sooner, then we get that testosterone, we get all the stuff, then they won't stunted growth, and they'll have the hair, and so they're deciding, though, they're making it now. I mean, I think nearly impossible if you're starting that young. How, like, even with like Jazz Jennings, you can't turn that around anymore. I mean,
you can't. And there are detransitioners who were on puberty blockers. There are detransitioners, who've had the bottom surgery stuff, and they have described a very interesting phenomenon. And they are the ones often online from trans activists. They get it a little bit harder because the trans activists go like, "Well, you didn't really detransition, did you?" And it's been described as they feel stuck, essentially, because they know what happened to them was wrong. They essentially think of like, if I could turn back the clock, I would, but I am where I am and I'm stuck.
yeah.
A lot of, and especially if they've had stuff like bottom surgery, regardless, they are still going to be essentially reliant on some form of hormone care for the rest of their life. And so while there is a way to essentially like accept and like live knowing that mistake, I would bet you that there's people out there who, it is much easier to dig your heels in. And, like the sunk cost fallacy, it is much easier to dig your heels in. I've gone this far. I'm just going to, this is going to be right. Stuff like that. And just kind of convince yourself of that. Instead of having to admit to not only yourself, but anyone you have ever interacted with during that time period that, yeah, I really messed up. And I don't think, especially with young kids, that is something, even the social aspect, we don't talk about enough. Because here's the thing, like I'm a relatively young person. I don't feel like it with how my bones are, but I am. And the social aspect, like the pressure of having to go around and tell people who have known you for years that this thing that you were so sure about when you were younger turned out to be a giant mistake. That is so incredibly embarrassing in a social setting. And I cannot imagine still being in like high school and having to do that. Like that would, like, socially, that would be, I cannot imagine how much of a struggle that would be. And I know there are some detransitioners who detransitioned while in high school and were only ever known as trans in high school, or like as the opposite sex, and then they detransitioned and everyone was like, what is going on?
Didn't that happen with Chloe?
I don't know about Chloe. Maybe I think she was just still been in high school.
She started younger, and when she was detransitioning, people just couldn't understand. She lost all of her friends were friends that she made while she was while she was a trans boy.
No, exactly. It's detransitioning is already such an isolating experience because the group that you can reach out to is still rather, it's rather small. It's a rather kind of depressing thing. It makes me very sad that the Reddit is getting bigger and bigger, because that means that there are more people affected by this. See, the thing with trans activists is they seem to want more trans people. Detransitioners never want to see another detransitioner again.
Yeah.
Like, we don't want anyone to go through this.
Yeah.
And that is the thing where it's like, but them wanting more trans people and putting more people down this pipeline is guaranteeing that you're going to have more detransitioners.
Unfortunately, this is going to get worse before it gets better.
It is going to, this is just the start. And I have hope it's going to get better, but I do believe for a lot of people, it's going to get a whole lot worse before we get there.
After what I saw yesterday, this is going to go down like lobotomies. I'm sorry. This is going to go down like lobotomies.
I posted on Twitter. I have a whole book. It's called Quackery, and it's all of the medical scandals and bad medicine.
I'm writing this.
It's on my Twitter and whenever I reply, it's like I posted the full cover and the index. But it has lobotomies, it has bloodletting, it has leeches, it has a bunch of other weird stuff that does not get talked about nearly as enough.
That's great. I should post on something that every day. Like, remember when we used to put leeches on? Remember when we used to bloodlet? Remember when?
Remember when we put radium in the drinking water?
Yeah. Remember what like? But lobotomies is it because it was something that happened to women. To cure them from.
Well, it is. Listen, it is not a pleasant thought to think back about like what I was going through as a young teenager and just going like, if this would have happened in a different like era, I would have been lobotomized.
Yeah,
it's not a fun thought. But then I've also heard specifically like bottom surgery stuff referred to as a sexual lobotomy.
That's
which I genuinely think sexual lobotomy for gender transition is a very apt description. When you get into just the amount of dysfunction and disconnect it causes, even in people who haven't had any kind of surgery, it's still devastating the damage that can be done.
Wow.
And
people don't talk about that. They don't talk about that a lot. Someone said, Prisha, this was a comment, Prisha just joined me and explained to my ex what she's doing to our preteen. I prayed through to her and she realizes the harm she's trying to do. This is not life-saving care. So, man, my thoughts, my prayers go out to a family. I'm really glad that your friend Prisha was able to talk. Because I think the more because these kids, it's almost like you want to show them here's what this is going to look like. Here's what I went through. You need to hear the other side before you start this. Just know.
It's insane about the hey, why don't you just read a detransitioner story? Like, why? I don't understand why activists specifically are so afraid of kids reading and or just hearing a detransitioner story. Yeah. And just it really is insane. Or even parents hearing a detransitioner story. Especially because there's more and more of us coming out of the woodworks each day. You think that would at least warrant listening, even if you don't agree. I think I've said multiple times, even if you don't agree, with me on other issues, could you at least listen? I think one of my most recent tweets was about the fact that my health issues presented themselves when I was still identifying as transgender before I considered detransitioning. So even if I didn't detransition, I would still have these same health issues I did. I do. I would have still had them in that alternate world where I didn't detransition. I would have still had those health issues. Except I would have even less support because everything would be immediately shut down by the trans community and I would have no one to turn to. And I feel like even trans people need to listen for that because here's the thing. You are one medical emergency away from being one of us in one form or another.
Yeah.
You'd think, hey, we took the same medication as you. This is this awful experience we had with it that physically tore my body apart. You think that might be a warrant just considering it?
Yes.
Considering that happened to someone and be instead of the very naive view of it will never be me. That's just your experience. It will never be me.
Yeah.
And
right now, I'm trying to look because I have a list of all the side effects. I was surprised, but keep talking. If you hear me, just.
It is one of those things where it's I feel like any other form of medicine, at least I would hope, when you have a group of people who are coming out and being yeah, I was harmed by this, I was damaged by this destroyed my body, this did all of these different things, you'd think these clinicians would at least pause. They would at least pause for a minute and be okay, this warrants looking into. The whole demographic shift in what gender dysphoria looked like from when it went to rarely presenting in like young boys as the typical patient. Like very rarely your typical patient would be like a young man, or a young boy, I should say, or men that were older. You would have that would be your tip, and then it's flipped into teenage girls. 4,000% increase. You think that would have been where we paused and like just looked at everything and we're like, hey, this group of teenage girls, the population famous for social contagions throughout all of history. You think we might want to take a look at that? And they all just went, no one. I know, and I'm aware some doctors did, and they got immediately shut down and like kicked out of their profession. But like,
I'm going to play a little something about why that is. Hold on, and I think you might. I fell asleep trying to watch it. I still have to finish it, but I want to share this screen here. So we can, I think you know this, have a little bit of insight as to why it is that, and I'm going to turn on the
invasive procedures is a vaginoplasty. That is where male to female patient is castrated, testicles removed, and the penis is inverted to create a vaginal cavity.
They can't even do lip filler in a convincing way in this country. You can't tell me they can recreate something as complex as female genital.
The Biden administration has kind of tacitly endorsed reconstructive surgery for minors.
A child will often know that they are transgender from the moment that they have any ability to express themselves.
There's 300,000 transgender youth. That number has, by the way, doubled over 5 years. They face a lifetime of zero sexual function.
It's almost too crazy.
It's perverse.
If someone had told you 15 years ago that kids in your, say, daughter's 9th grade class would be coming to school in drag and would be affirmed in that by their teachers and the broader community, you would say there's no chance that could happen in this country. And of course, it has happened, and it's now happening at scale. Transgenderism is not just a fad, it's a fact of life across this country, not just the elites, but in small towns, everywhere. And so the question is, how did something this unnatural and prima facie demented happen so quickly? Well, of course, there's got to be money involved. Yeah. Interestingly, no one that we're aware of has taken a close forensic look at where the money's coming from and where it's going. And that's why we're so delighted to see research done by our next guest, Chris Moritz, who's a longtime investment banker and policy guy, has done on this question. Transgenderism. It didn't happen by accident. Some people are profiting from it.
Yep.
And with that, we introduce our guest who joins us here on set. Thank you.
Thank you, Tucker. It's beyond pleasure to be here.
Well, we're grateful to have you. And there's been a lot of complaining about this. It's clearly a destructive trend that's hurting people, particularly children, destabilizing society, and it doesn't make any sense. So it's making all of us irrational. But for some reason, nobody has taken the time to figure out who's profiting from this. And you've done what I think is a spectacular dive into this, an amazing overview of the economics of transgenderism. So with that, I'll just kind of back off and let you describe what you found.
Well, I think there's so many elements to this issue.
Yes.
Philosophical, religious even.
Yes.
Religious sociological.
Especially.
Of course.
Yeah.
But the economics of it, what I call transgender Inc. is something that has gotten very, very little attention, and it deserves to be highlighted in very visible way.
Yes.
Because this is a market that in 2018, this market is made up of sex reassignment surgeries and hormone replacement therapies, which include a number of different pharmaceutical products. But the combined value sales of sex reassignment surgeries and the pharmaceutical products in 2018 was $2.94 billion. By 2022, that figure had rose to $4.18 billion. And by 2030, our analysis indicates that would increase to $7.5 billion, which represents an 8.5% compound annual growth rate.
It you have that one video of you've had
So-
multiple videos at this point of even like professionals in the field being like, we could fund entire hospitals off of this stuff. It's going to be a big moneymaker for our hospitals, stuff like that. And it's disheartening. And it also is it is one of those things where, and you see it's like, okay, well, why is it that the countries, that maybe don't have the financial incentive for this are the ones pulling it back when the new research comes out, and then the American medical system will dig their heels in. And you got to wonder, like, that part has to have either we are alarmingly ideologically captured, which, to be fair, I wouldn't put it past society right now, or they're making money off of it, or both.
Well, and I think because I want to end with, I hope you can come back again, because I know a lot of my mom's sorority friends would like to join, like they have so many questions, but because I want you to talk about your lawsuit a little bit, because that's really important. But what you're saying is true. I have in front of me Sweden. They have stopped as of February 2022. They are no longer going to allow these procedures on minors. Why? Because they released a report in Sweden, the updated guidelines, that the incidence of detransitioners and young adults with transition regret had gone up so astronomically, they could not in good conscience no longer say that the risks outweighed the benefits, but they actually were tracking, not what we're doing in the United States.
The United States gender clinics wish that detransitioners would just shut up and go hide under a rock somewhere. Because the minute we start speaking about things, people get not only iffy, but it brings to light that this is happening to children. Because I think beforehand, before this became like a big topic, people could, like your average person, could somewhat have it in their head like, oh, they wouldn't do that to kids. And then detransitioners put a immense hole in that narrative of, yes, this is happening.
I never would have thought they would do this to kids. Never in my wildest dreams. You and I have had conversations about this. I know I'm not alone, where I feel like one day you hear that Bruce Jenner is Caitlyn Jenner, and you're like, what? And then suddenly now transgender is basically move over gay, now it's transgender. And that's a lot of my friends in Gays Against Groomers, which I was with yesterday. Great, really great people, great guys. And they were walking around with me like bodyguards. They're so passionate about this cause. Actually, you know what? That'll be what my final clip, because I'm going to play Rocky, who, and I don't know if he's watching, to him. His speech I thought was really good, and I was so happy that, because there were, to be honest, there were not a whole lot of speeches from those of us who are trying to protect children, even though 70% of America, Gallup polling, 71% of Americans do not want biological boys on girls' teams. And well over half do not want to medicalize kids young. I believe it's way more than that, but the way that the polling is set up, they're asking questions about, do you support gender affirming care? And then it
is always phrasing it like that. And these polls, you have polls and surveys and stuff. Fun fact, the reason that they like to, claim transition regret and detransitioning is so low is because in some of these surveys, by the mere fact you are a detransitioner or regret things, you are cut out of the data entirely. Like I think it was the United States, there was a big one that was going on last year. About trans people looking for results on on the opinions, And by the nature of no longer identifying like as trans, even if you had transitioned and you'd since detransitioned, you were not allowed to give any thoughts or even put that you were there, that, like you exist as a detransitioner on there, because it would immediately boot you out of the survey.
Boy, that sounds a lot like what they do with vaccines. Like that when it's inconvenient data, oh, well, suddenly you're not a part of the you're not part of the study anymore.
Detransitioners are very inconvenient data to have lying around, especially with something that, you're trying to push on children. Having, like I said, detransitioners are the trans kids that they promised to protect. I was one of the trans kids that they promised to protect. And where is that protection now, as I'm being told to end it by the same people who swore, when I was 15 to protect me?
It's just awful, and another thing with Finland, something that I had just learned this week when I was really doing my deep dive before testifying, that Finland's studies, so when they began, and a lot of the Dutch protocols, protocols, and in Finland included, when they first started to do what we're taking on right now here in the United States, the only kids that they would allow to receive puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones, they could present with no comorbidities, none. If they had a comorbidity, they were out. They could not be included in the study, especially if they were on the spectrum for autism, cutting, any sort of cutting, bulimia, anorexia, anything like that. And then they would not provide these drugs because they understood that would taint the data, and they needed to be sure that they were solving
the actual issue.
Yes.
I believe it was in one of the countries of it. They also completely ruled out any sexual trauma or abuse that would disqualify you. And it's almost like that should be something that should disqualify you from cutting off the body parts that are often involved in exploitation.
If you applied those standards, but from what I witnessed yesterday in particular, there'd be no one left. Because every single person, every single one, I experienced sexual trauma. I have a drug problem. I had this going on.
It's also looking back at myself, even in like a sane world, how would you take at the start of this, like 14, 15-year-old who had been sexually exploited, was depressed, anxious, on a ton of antidepressant and like different medications. They had me on Xanax at one point at like 14. Who hated her body, obviously had some kind of body issues, had a lot going on at home, essentially had the list of issues that would have disqualified me. And they went, yeah, sure, this is the one that we're going to affirm into reality here. And I have phrased it at different times as these professionals took the most chaotic and dark time in my life and affirmed it into reality. They affirmed that chaos I was going through into reality the minute they agreed with me that this struggle I was having, that really was just me, needing to learn to love myself and grow into myself and grow up.
Yes.
They affirmed it into reality.
Miriam said that. She said, we should be teaching these kids to love themselves, to accept themselves. We should be really trying to get at what is going on. And she didn't deny that there is true gender dysmorphia. There really is true dysphoria. That and body dysmorphia. It's rare, but it's there, and you won't know that's the issue if you don't go through intense years of psychotherapy. And after that, then by then you're an adult, then You can see what you can do, but that is just not happening. They're giving it out at Planned Parenthood. They're giving these drugs out to autistic kids after a 30-minute session at Planned Parenthood, like it's birth control.
And here's the thing, like I was essentially, I've been like immediately medicalized twice. The first one was when I was uncomfortable with my period. It was immediately birth control to just skip it entirely. And I don't think that was a good idea for separate reasons, because I'm going to be real. If someone, when I first started it at like 13, if someone would have taught me how to track that, I probably would have been, fine with it, because it wouldn't have been some awful surprise every time it happened. And it probably wouldn't have led me to the place where the clause of, if you hate your period, you must just be a boy, could have dug in so deep, There are really simple, I don't think parents realize that there are really simple things that as your kid is going through puberty that can help prevent the, like I said, the claws of this ideology from sticking into those teenage insecurities and warping them.
Well, that's good to know. I'm glad that you're letting people know. And I have the fact sheet out. This is what I went, I had 3 binders.
Oh boy.
All ready to go. So I had, but that as many as 88% of gender dysphoric girls and 98% of gender dysphoric boys will desist if their biological integrity is persistently affirmed. So this should be a fact. I mean, imagine telling a kid, I know you feel this way now, but there is an 88% and 98% chance that after we really go through this therapy, you're going to feel okay in your own body.
Well, like imagine if there was anything else where you had such a high success rate for just leaving it alone. Like, can you think of any other like issue, like mental issue like that, where it's like, if you just leave it alone and make sure that they're like supportive and loved and like affirmed in reality, essentially, and just being like, don't worry, you're just growing up. I'll help you get through this. Puberty's tough. We're going to get through this. Here's how we help you. That it just goes away. Like, I can't think of anything.
Would you take chemotherapy if they said, if we don't do anything, there's a 98% chance it'll go away, but or you take the chemotherapy and your hair will fall out and you're going to be really sick and you're putting toxins? No one would do it. No one would say,
doing that is all your fault. There was no medical professionals that led you down this path, and you're a bad person if you talk about it. That's what that equivalent would be.
No, that's awful.
It is just insane that, like, just when you hit puberty and your brain is finally flooded with those right hormones of your body growing up, and that isn't interrupted in some way, that you grow into your body, you grow up, you feel more at ease with yourself. And it is insane that we have that high of a percentage of kids that goes through with. And then we're still saying we're going to block their puberty so they never get that chance.
Well, they need those hormones to those hormones are healing, and you're denying that as those hormones start to come through, they will eventually help heal that. If you're a girl, as you first go into puberty, it's like, no, but as you grow into your hormones and you develop, you become okay with it. Like nature finds a way. I just think that I also believe that when you fight nature, when you're at war with what is meant, I just think it's going to be a losing battle most of the time.
It is incredibly exhausting. And there was a point that I got to last year where I was, I was thinking about my future. I was thinking about what I wanted for my life, relationship wise, what did I want my future relationships to look like? What did I want family to look like? What did I want? All this good stuff. What did I want to do with my life? Because I kind of finally hit that part where I could really picture it out more than I could, as a teenager. And I got to a point where I kind of saw two paths in front of me. And it was dig my heels in and keep fighting until it destroys me and I combust. Or kind of, like lay my weapons down and stop the battle and make peace with reality no matter how hard that might be. Because here's the thing, I didn't expect to go into detransitioning and it to be easy. I never once thought, oh, this is the easy way out. It's not. Because it was going to happen. I knew when I detransitioned, I was going to have to make peace with a lot of emotions that were never handled right because of the fact that I was pushed into transition. So all at once I got to deal with the unresolved, trauma from being exploited, having to find new ways to cope with things like depression and anxiety and new feelings, and having to really, find ways to feel at peace with a body that not only had I harmed through transition, but that I had for years been both telling myself and having the entirety of the world around me tell me was wrong. And like I said, it felt like I was in a battle and I laid down my weapons and said, I'm making peace with reality, because at that point, I was like, I am done being chained to a medical system. I was getting sick of doing my shot every week. I was sick about the fact that at the time, and I still do, I wanted to move somewhere, like cabin in the woods style. And I was thinking about it and I was like, well, I need a pharmacy nearby. I need doctors nearby. If I'm still on T, I need all this stuff that limits my freedom to go do stuff and not be chained to that medical industry.
Yeah.
And then that all kind of, it hit more at once, but
done chained to a medical industry. That's what's happening. I mean, it's a forever commitment, because
I spent my entire teenage years in one form or another being chained to a medical industry, whether that be antidepressants and SSRIs or transition. And, I moved up to college and at first I stopped the SSRI I was on for all my teenage years. I stopped that. And then that allowed me to really feel some of the emotions that had just been numbed out by it, and allowed me to start to process them. And then, a year later, or not even a year later, that would have been March. And then, not even a year later, I would say about like 6 months later, I stopped testosterone, and I was just like, I can't do it.
So I find it interesting that all the folks that were like, I've never been happier in my life, I imagine they too, they're probably on an SSRI. So they're on antidepressants and all, because to manage. So they are on so much medication just to feel good.
Okay. Here is the short list of things I was on in high school when this was all going on. A variety of different antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications, a variety of SSRIs, Xanax, Adderall, Vyvanse, birth control. And then testosterone.
Wow. And I
was given Xanax my freshman year of high school.
That is not a normal thing. It is very hard because it's so addictive. It's very difficult to get a prescription for Xanax, especially under the age of 18. So the fact Xanax, SSRI, you're on ADHD medicine.
Medication.
I just
it was in it. Mind you, some of these had overlap. Some of them were at different times. Like they never gave me Xanax and ADHD medication at the same time. Yeah. Like the fact that they gave me Xanax as a 14-year-old who was already on other, like they gave it to me as, when you're really, really anxious, take this. It was supposed to be like that. But I would go and then I would be half falling asleep in class. I have people that met me when I was still on some of these medications. Yep. And they still know me now. And they'll bring it up. They'll be like, yeah, you were so sleepy when I first met you all the time. You were just like curling up and falling asleep everywhere. And I was like, yeah, yeah, I was.
So how much, so every day you had, you'd have your list of medications. I mean, a young teenager, I mean, this is crazy. And you can see, and I'm going to finish watching that Tucker Carlson, but I think we all kind of suspected, especially after COVID, that this is something that's making money. Now, I don't think it's all about that. I think that there's a trifecta. You've got activists, you've got
the true believers out there.
Then you've got the politicians who, and I witnessed this yesterday. I promise you, none of these politicians are asking these kids to babysit their own child. They don't, in real life, they do not, these are not going to be the people they're hanging out with.
Oh, never.
You're going to bring them votes. They're going to scare, and they also can be used, I think, to scare off work. If you deny us this, then you're going to pay. We're going to make you hurt by. We're going to just.
Well, they are some of the most unhinged people I have ever had the displeasure of being around.
And when I say make you hurt, I don't mean like physically. I mean just social media, make you feel sad or nervous, or just like try and get you to lose your jobs. Maybe something like that.
They will make you hurt in every other way, and then eventually it might get physical. Some of them are not they're not past that. Let's be real.
Yeah,
as someone who's been like grabbed at while at these events, they will.
You guys, like the amount of security when there's some event where you're going to have, I mean, you could, like when you have someone like you or Riley Gaines or Chloe Cole, and all the security you need, it's like, why would you want to harm like these young girls? It's so antithetical to, that men shouldn't try to go after. I know when I was in Philadelphia, it was just really weird to see that there's these men trying to attack us, and they could, well, why would they care? They don't know what a woman is. They don't think
well, that's the thing. When you take away any, when you say, oh well, men and women are the same, all this, there's no biological difference, there's no difference at all, basically, when they become interchangeable. In their mind, there's no reason why someone who's like, a smaller woman should be protected. And you did mention I'm fairly tall, but still still.
Yeah, well, why? Yeah, they're gonna say there's nothing different. I don't need to hold the door open for you. What is a woman? Who cares? It's and it's getting late. I want to play one. I'm going to play one more clip. This is Representative Nedwesky, and she is also with Moms for Liberty. She was recently elected. She's on the Education Committee, and I was in the room when it happened, and it was hilarious. I couldn't believe that she had done this. This is going to be fun.
Oh boy!
Hold on.
I should have, since you were going to this day, I should have given you my bingo card for these kinds of events I've made for the people that show up.
Yeah, if it was some kind of drinking party, we wouldn't have lasted long. But all right, watch.
Oh no! If it was a drinking game, you would die.
Trans girls are a subset of women, and this bill excludes that protected subset of that group.
Yes. So the bill would divide a line between all women or girls participating in sports by saying some are allowed to participate and some are not.
Okay. So my only question is, what is a woman?
I can refer you to the bill. Let's see. the bill defines a female as well, it doesn't. It just says that sex is determined at birth by a physician and is reflected on the birth certificate.
I asked for the definition of a woman, not a female, or sex at birth.
So I can't help you. It doesn't appear in the bill.
He's not a biologist. Was that the line that was used in the Supreme Court?
Yeah. Yeah, I can't help you. It wasn't in the bill. I can't. We were laughing. Oh my gosh. Let me, where is it? I can't, I'm sorry if I don't, this is a grown man. This is a lawyer.
Where are we as a society where that has become the defining question of like the past few years? I want to know where in like the collapse of things, not being able to define simple like words that have always had a meaning comes in. Because I'm assuming it's in a good place.
Okay. No, like this is the Matt Walsh moment, channeling Matt Walsh. Like you catch them every time. They won't do it. They can't do it.
You would think it's been a while since. It's been a while since that documentary or whatever came out. You'd think at this point they would at least have some kind of coherent ideological answer to that. That isn't a recursive definition of anyone who says they are a woman is a woman. That's not a definition. My like 5th grade English teacher taught me that it can't be a definition if it has the word in the definition. But like, you'd think they've had a while to think about this. Like collectively,
yeah,
you've had a while. Why don't you have an answer?
They don't have an answer yet. And here's what's interesting is they used to try to say, well, biological sex, sure, yeah, but it may, and then they might throw in the intersex thing. Mm-hmm. I have more clips of him that are going to be great when I'm going to
work this weekend. But now, didn't deserve any of this.
I know. They're like intersex.
Also, fun fact: intersex conditions are sex specific. They still fall under like you have to be a male to experience this intersex condition. You have to be a female to experience this one. I have a whole little chart that I posted somewhere that another detransitioner made. But like,
send that to me because I need to have a good answer for that with the intersex.
I have the book by what is his name? Zachary. I'm forgetting his last name. I have the book. It's called Binary, and it's debunking the sex spectrum myth. And it's I just started reading it. It's very interesting. But just like poor people with disorders of sexual development do not deserve to be dragged into your peanut gallery so you can make an argument over something that doesn't exist. You know,
that's a good point.
They do not deserve to be dragged into this for you to, justify sterilizing gender confused children.
Yeah.
If I had if I had any of these conditions, I would be furious that I kept getting brought up in this, frankly.
So I've got a clip of him saying, well, because he's being questioned, well, I think it was Representative Wickers had asked him, well, when you're born, genitalia, and that's how you know if you're a boy or girl. Is that what you believe? And of course he said, well, no, because sometimes doctors make a guess and sometimes they get it wrong. There's lots of times, they just get it wrong. And then there's the intersex.
Right. They're just guessing. They don't have any medical training on this. They are just like flipping a coin, and that is how. And they're just they're right 99.9% of the time. It's just a guess.
Yeah, and I've read about this. See talk shows about this. I've never seen someone live and in person, and many folks that were just kind of denying reality right there, live.
I'm gonna like hold my phone up here. This is the Twitter account. If you ever want someone who can really debunk the whole like Zachary Elliott, he's very good at. He's the one that wrote the book I was talking about. He is very good at debunking just this whole that like sex is a big spectrum and it's all of this stuff. He's very, very smart and very good about debunking that. And I've tagged him in, I think, to a thread where this was going on, and I was like, go read his stuff.
It's so easy to do because they use the same talking points. You will just basically hear them say the same thing over and over, same talking points. And so debunking it, once it's just not in reality. But when this guy was saying this, what you realize is they used to say, well, okay, yeah, sex is binary, but we're talking about gender and gender expression and gender identity. No more. They no longer use that.
It's the same thing of they've started, I've noticed this, instead of saying trans woman, in some places they'll say trans female, which female is a biological term that refers to your sex.
Yep.
And it is very interesting, the slow creep in from it being, oh, well, don't you know sex and gender are different? No one's claiming that they're the opposite sex.
And now they don't
yes,
talk
they
like
absolutely are. And they're now trying to say that biological sex doesn't exist, or it's a spectrum, or you can change biological sex is another one that I've heard. That like that by taking hormones, you are literally changing your biological sex.
And when you do that, so this has consequences because you're not. And then I know Miriam Grossman had said that there were kids, when you told them that some data that a lot of, if for most girls, when they take testosterone, here's an effect, but the kids are like, oh, well, then I'm good because I'm a boy.
Yeah.
And you can say,
and here's
oh,
the thing,
no, I'm
that
not.
is something
I'm a
that,
boy.
like,
I believe.
that is something that I didn't buy fully into. I didn't buy into the like, oh no, my body. But I bought into briefly before it was like debunked to me and it made more sense. The like, oh, I just have a male brain in a female body and that's why my body is tolerating all this. Because the hormones are right for my brain. And that, that's bollocks or whatever. It's bullshit. But it is a genuine belief, and it is a belief. Like, this is not based on anything aside from mere belief that, well, I'm actually a male, so it's okay that I'm pumping myself with insane amounts of testosterone through a body that is not designed to process it. It's okay that I'm doing that. It's okay that I'm taking estrogen levels in men that will cause bone problems. Like, because I'm actually biologically this. And it's just, I don't know where that is like a dangerous twist in the argument, even more so than just, taking the stuff in the first place, because you've added a level of almost religious fervor in the belief to it.
Yeah, that you're going to deny. And I want to get this before you end. And if, just in case someone's watching, just in case, so they know, if there's someone even considering this, the medical harms of puberty blockers when used for gender dysphoria include emotional distress, new onset psychiatric illness, reduced bone density, permanent sexual dysfunction, the possibility of permanent sterility, and of cross-sex hormones, cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure, heart attack, blood clots, stroke, diabetes, cancer. These and surgeries will maim healthy tissue and destroy healthy organs. And there's more. This is just like there is a very long list of side effects, very real side effects, and no real proof. There's no long-term studies that these medical and surgical interventions that they work, that they end feelings. It's always something else. It's always something else, and there's
like I said, the bar for a successful transition is such on the ground. Like it's oh, you didn't kill yourself? That's the bar? Instead of asking like, oh, do you have a fulfilling life free from substance abuse, free from like, what is your family like now? How are the quality of your relationships? Are you satisfied with like life outside of this? Do you have any, do you have a fulfilling life that isn't just as an LGBT activist? Is another, this, by the way, this is all from I'm like basically quoting a Twitter thread I just retweeted from I think it's Helena. But just that like the quality, how we measure a quality of life after transition is so low that trans people should be up in arms that it's so low. Like, this is the standard for your care. Why aren't you up in arms mad at these doctors that they think the only successful like aspect of your life is just that you haven't ended it yet?
That's
if that is success, that is terrible.
It is terrible. It's terrible. Well, you know what? It's 10 o'clock, so I'm going to play the last thing with Rocky. But if you're available next week, because there's so many more, I have so many more questions I didn't even get to. And I know that my friends would like to talk with you, and I always have fun talking with you. But I'm going to play this last clip of Rocky, and then you can say your final words. But this, I'm going to get him on just a second, because it was really bold. I'm really glad that he was able to do it. He's with Gays Against Groomers, and man, they level a lot of vitriol towards that group, because I think that because they're successful and because hold on, I'm just trying to get to my page. Why don't you talk right now? My it's getting.
I was gonna say, I know that I believe Chloe's story was also read today or yesterday at Capitol.
I read, yes.
I know because I have a friend who is with Partners for Ethical Care who was up there, Jeanette Cooper.
I loved,
and she was also texting me while you guys were going through your stuff. She's actually the one that gave me the little sweatshirt I have here. It says "Love Mom" on it. It has the same art as like a little she made.
I need to say, she was a first speaker, and amazing as always. She's such a beautiful person, and she's so calm when no matter what storm is around. She's really calm and well spoken, and if she listens to this, I've had so many members of Moms for Liberty say, that lady, that's the first lady that spoke, I think she's with Partners for Ethical Care, would she come speak to our group? Because I feel like there's so much we could learn from her. Like, there was something about her.
I don't know if she I don't know which thing she read in Wisconsin, but she has a speech that goes through the suicide myth surrounding transgender care and all that. And it is one of the most like coherent, concise, to the point, makes the point great, that there are, and also like hopeful things regarding this. And if you haven't heard that, you should ask her to read it, because it's impressive.
I'm writing this down because I'd really like to hear some hopeful things. But I'm going to post her speech tomorrow, because it was hopeful and honest, and there was some moaning when she was talking, because she was being real, she was telling kids the truth, or these teens, or these adults, and but she did it in a very
one of the most memorable lines from her thing is that there are always more than two options. And I think there was one time I was testifying without her, and I actually put that line into the testimony I was reading off, just because that like hit me, because it is a thing. Like, you are presented with two options. You are presented with transition or death, and there are always more than two options. And the black and white thinking of there is two options is one of the most concerning things with the trans narrative. And she just handles it so well. She's awesome.
I have, like, when I share the screen, I don't have her speech, but I do have. Here's a picture of her when I was sitting next to her, and great, like this, and she's just.
Oh no, it is Aaron.
And yeah, so there's, and I was hoping I could find her speech somewhere, but
no, I think, does Aaron I can't remember if Aaron had me blocked at one point, I think.
Oh, Aaron, oh yeah. But yeah, so she did so good. She did great. And now you can see my crazy, gotta try to get back to, I know, my crazy feed.
My feed at this point is about half like political topical things, and then the other half is just like aesthetic pictures and artwork. And honestly, I'm very glad I curated like that, because it's a great mix.
I've got a lot of stuff. Okay, so here we're gonna listen to Rocky right here. There he is.
To preface this by saying we support adults making their own choice to transition as long as it doesn't harm anyone else and none else has to pay for it. That being said, the war on children must end today. The number of transgender people seeking medicalization is exploding. The percentage increase is in the thousands, not normal. And in Madison, a 7-year-old child can come here because it is a sanctuary county for transgender people and have their healthy body parts removed and be prescribed medications to suppress their natural puberty. But puberty isn't scary, it's normal. The saturation of trans ideology has taken over every aspect of society today. We watch our screens and mainly see transgender people who are happy. We see a lot of celebration stories about how beautiful it is to be trans. What you don't always see are the horror stories that follow some of these victims. That's what these people are. They're victims. The rise in detransitioners coming out is extraordinary, but not shocking. The brain doesn't fully develop until the age of 25, sometimes even later. There are laws put in place to protect people from doing or making decisions that can ultimately ruin their lives. There are laws to drink, to get a tattoo, vote, fight for our country, to drive, to get a loan. But when it comes to mutilating your body, this ideology says any age is okay. It's open season. In 2002, a controversial interview with Professor Ocampo, a Filipino-American sociology professor with expertise in gender and sexuality, he spoke about the precedence of underlying psychiatric disorder in a portion of the transgender group. This led to a response by the healthcare inspectorate, who asked that a Dutch association for psychiatry formulate clear criteria for indications of sex reassignment procedures on that basis. The professor received an invitation from the board to participate in working group for transsexual operations, and then suddenly it went quiet. The group never met. Ocampo came up with his own proposal to appoint an independent review committee to the project, which never happened. And yet things of lesser importance typically have a review committee. To quote Ocampo, there is currently no consensus on how to best shape the indications of gender affirmation. Did you know a third of trans patients do not follow up for their reviews or how they're doing post-transition? This means we don't even know the real number of those that regret their decision. Frankly, one is too many. I'm sick of being labeled a transphobic bigot, self-hating gay, fascist, right-wing, homophobic conspiracy theorist for saying this. The labels are over. There is nothing phobic about protecting a child's innocence from being exploited and handed over on a silver platter to medical industry to carve up like an animal. Because a boy likes pink or a girl likes to play with trucks, it's nonsense. As adults and Americans, we have a duty to protect children from harm, from the real dangers that are out there in this world. It is our responsibility to guide these children on a path that will give them the best chance at a healthy, successful, long, happy future, not coerce them into a life of endless debt, reconstruction surgeries, depression, and suicidal thoughts. The experimentation on children must end today. If a child can consent to something as extreme as permanent as a sex change, they can consent to anything, and we believe this is the goal. The line from A to B, this is very, very short. It is up to us to correct this mistake. What side of history do you want to be on? The side that fought to protect the innocence of children, letting them grow up to be themselves and discover themselves naturally? Or do you want to be the side that openly experimenting on children? Because I choose the path number one. Let kids be kids.
Perfect. Perfect. Let kids be kids. I thought did a great job. And now your final thoughts after hearing that.
I agree. It really is let kids be kids. Let them grow up whole. There's no, it's the urgency of like, no, we need to do this now. When like I just said before we watched that, there's more than two options. No matter how much activists will scream in your face that there's only two options, there's always more than two options, especially with children. They are, like I said before, they just have
no.
They just have such a magic in how they, experience stuff. And it does, making them think about these topics and telling them there's something wrong with them for the most basic stuff, it kills that magic. And it kills that innocence that they view the world through. Vulnerable adults deserve protecting as well, and that's something that gets left out of this conversation normally, except, with bills like this, it is just talking about kids. But
agree with you.
It's one of those things where it's like, how many, it's one of the things where it's like, okay, they argue there's too few detransitioners. How many people's lives are you willing to put on a chopping block in terms of their physical and mental health, their development, their ability to have things like fulfilling relationships? How many of these people? How many is enough until you stop seeing them as just collateral damage and you start seeing us as, victims of this industry who are trying to get some kind of message out?
I think that lawsuits are, legislation's one thing, but there's always going to be the states that won't do it. But I think lawsuits, and look at just what you said. I believe the 8 or 9 countries that are no longer on this train, they're not on this bus anymore. They have medical care systems that aren't as profit driven as the United States of America. And I'm all for, I don't want to have the UK health system because that's not good either.
You don't want Canadian healthcare with their recommendations for what you should do with things?
Yeah, they're just, oh, you're sad, you just kill yourself.
Yeah, no, Canada is special, but
yeah, that's kind of, but I'm a capitalist, but I think you're going to have to take it, bring it where it hurts. And you have just filed a lawsuit. Which legal groups are you working with?
I am working with, oh God, I get this messed up all the time.
Harmeet?
Yeah, I'm working with Meets group along with I was trying to remember the actual organization name, and I'm blanking on the order the acronym goes in. But I'm working with them through a local lawyer in my state.
Yes, because you do, even because when maybe there's nonprofit groups, but you'll have to have a local lawyer from your state that will help bring all that through. And you're in the very early process, but you are the 5th detransitioner to bring a large multi-state law.
I am one of I believe it's actually 6 or 7.
Oh, you're 6. Okay.
There's 6 or 7 of us, I think. And those are just the ones that are public.
Okay.
About it. Because as far as I'm aware, there's an organization called Transition Justice who is helping detransitioners and those harmed by this. And from what at least they've implied that there are some that are happening that aren't public.
Okay. So, all right. Well, this is what's going to need to happen.
The phrase I've heard is what is it? Litigation stops mutilation or something like that.
Yeah, and it's not just making them pay for, it's forcing them to have best practices that are actual best practices. It's at least, even let's say New York or California, you're never going to get them to ban this on the statewide level. That would have to be federal. But at the very least, these lawsuits are going to force there's compliance and standards. It's not going to be this free for all right now where, and I feel like they are hiding behind, the LGBTQIA plus community. That's how, normally we wouldn't let kids read porn, but hey, if there's a gay scene or if the main character is transgender, then go ahead, you can do whatever you want. Where people will suppress their natural instincts to protect children because, I have to be inclusive, I can't say anything. And that's where I think if you're on the left, you don't have to be crazy. You can be a liberal. You don't have to agree with me on politics. You don't have to, you can be a socialist, whatever you want, but please, don't allow the things about you that are kind and empathetic, they're being weaponized.
It is like weaponized compassion to the sense of you had the gay rights movement where it was like, okay, love is love, we just want to get married. And and it really, I think it comes down to more so these like big kind of non-profit like activist organizations that they fought for gay marriage so hard. And then when that happened and they realized that there was a lot of money in some of these issues, they kind of picked up the trans thing and ran with it in a way that is now actively undermining the years and years worth of work that gay activists did to just get accepted in society. But now you also have the fact that they are also now actively harming kids who would grow up to be gay because they're transitioning.
Trans the gay away. That's why they say it. Because now if you're a kid that's same-sex attracted, well, you must be. You're a girl same-sex attracted. Well, you're a boy. And
it's so sad when you hear the older generation of gay men and lesbians who talk about their childhood and talk about how they're if I. I'm pretty sure if I would have been born in this day and age that I would have been taken to a gender clinic with everything I did as a kid.
Yep.
And there's just something, deeply sad. You had a quote out of somewhere at the Tavistock. Some worker was like, yeah, there won't be any gay people left if we keep this up. And
Jane has said that. She's the founder of Gays Against Groomers. She's I was I had some issues because she's a lesbian. Anxiety, depression. She's like, I very well would have been one of those kids that would have been attracted to this, that could have had a teacher say, hey, maybe you're transgender. And so I think those folks that did suffer as kids and preteens and through adolescence with some issues because they were different. I mean, we have to have compassion. These kids, they are different, and
they have a completely unique struggle when it comes to sexuality and figuring that out. That is outside of the norm of what we see portrayed or maybe understood, and it is. It is one of those things where that is now being twisted in with the gender stuff to the point where it's gonna manipulate those same feelings. It's gonna twist them just like it does with a lot of general puberty, going through puberty and discomfort. It twists it into, no, you're in the wrong body.
Yeah, and by different too, maybe you've experienced trauma, and that unlike the kids in your class, sexual trauma, emotional divorce, a very painful divorce in your family at just the wrong moment where you're about to enter puberty. I know that's something that happened with you, where just life events, things happen, and they happen at a time where you're most vulnerable. And normally a child would, an adult would talk to a child about resiliency. Yeah, this is going to be hard. We're going to work through this. We're going to work through your real issues. But instead, like you said, they're masking all of that pain. Saying, oh no, this is what this is really about. I can't even imagine that you have a kid with, and as we've talked, that has a series of different issues. And as an adult, you ignore all of that. You ignore all of your training as a health professional, and you say, "Oh, you're self-diagnosing. Okay, that's fine. I'll just affirm your self identity."
And even like I said earlier about how, like, why would you be the adult to tell the kid that, like, every insecurity and fear and, you know, bad feeling they have about their body, why are you going to be the adult to tell them they're right to feel like that and that everything about them is wrong?
It doesn't make sense.
It is a level of almost double think that is one of those things. So, like, I believe that kids who think they're trans, I believe that they are resilient, but I also believe that they are perfectly fine the way they are, and they will get through this, and that no matter what some of these activists say, you will live. You will get through this because they are resilient. And I believe they are strong, and they will live, and they will get through this no matter how many times you hear those activists saying the self-fulfilling prophecy and spreading the well-documented social contagion of suicidality to these children. I'm sorry, but it is not passionate to tell them that. If you actually cared about them, you would see how resilient they are and know that they will get through.
That dynamic is coaching to me. It's coaching. You want to get this? I feel like they're coaching these kids to say these words, to say, when I'm not sure
that is a thing. That is a thing, specifically in online circles of, well, if you don't think you meet the criteria for this, just lie. That's a thing that has been going around since even when I transitioned. Now, you know, with everything I was going through, I genuinely believed I had a medical condition. And that was the thing. It's like no one explored it very well to see that, no, I just had other issues going on. But it's, you know, it's stuff like, oh, if you just that whole thing. And then the fact that suicidality does have a well-documented social contagion factor, and it is just thrown out there. People who care about suicidal people do not talk in the way these activists do.
I know. You're exactly right. That's a really good point.
People who care about suicidal people are very careful with how you approach a subject, and you approach it knowing that these people are going to be resilient and that they deserve compassion and that they're going to get, you approach it from a place of hope. You do not approach it from a place of, if this doesn't happen, you're more likely to kill yourself.
Yeah, you don't affirm that. Yeah, totally. You're going to kill yourself. Why wouldn't you kill yourself? Because if you don't get what you want, I mean, it's ridiculous.
Not only does it teach that unhealthy behavior in terms of like not getting what you want, you need to go to drastic measures after that if you don't get what you want, but it also, it spreads that idea. And I say this as someone who was never truly suicidal, because there is a difference between a scary thought and actually being suicidal. And that is another thing that gets conflated in this. And even then, going through my transition, it was one of those things where it was like, okay, I did the first step, you know, I got surgery, and I was like, well, I don't feel, you know, I'm not suicidal, but if I don't do this next step, will I be? You know, if I don't keep going, will those feelings come up? And it worms especially if you're a young, vulnerable person who is already, like, let's say, in the mental health care industry for other reasons, it will worm its little way in the back of your brain. And every time, you know, you maybe don't do something, you're thinking about something, it does pop up, and it tells you, like, well, you know, if I don't do this, will I feel like that? You know, will I be suicidal if I don't do that? And that is such an unhealthy mindset that spawns from how these activists talk about suicide. And, you know, getting older and now having even like the very base level of training of how you deal with people who are having these scary thoughts. it is insane that no one, specifically mental health professionals, have not come out of the woodworks and actively condemned how these activists talk about it. Some of these activist organizations, I don't know if it's still on their website, but on their website even talk about how you cannot do things like blame a piece of legislation for causing suicide. You can't do that. That's not how suicide works. But they still go about, and at every single hearing and testimony I have been to, they bring it up that this is killing kids. You're going to be the reason kids kill themselves. Blow your hands. And that is the most those are not the words of people who care about actual people who might be suicidal. Those are the words from people who want a martyr. Those are the words of people who want a martyr. They can raise up that body before it's even cold to prove their point. They do not care about people. And this is a hill I'm willing to die on, because it is something, as someone, like, I've had to talk people back off of that, like, proverbial ledge, essentially. Like, I've spent hours on the phones with friends as a teenager. I've seen kind of what this looks like. And it is one of those things that, like, I will die on the hill of it. That is not how people who actually care about people who struggle with suicidality talk about it. And these are not people who want people to get better. They want a martyr.
Yeah. And
anyway.
there were so many kids that were saying, this saved my life. This saved my life. I mean,
it saved my life too, until it didn't.
I would die. I would have said that right now.
I would have said that same thing. At 17, I would have said that same thing. This is life-saving care until it's not anymore. Until it's not. This saved my life. I'm the happiest I've ever been until it wasn't. This worked for me until it didn't. Because here, by all means, if you would have gone to me 2 years ago, I would have been the biggest transition success story. I fit in. I had no social problems, really. I essentially had I was doing, I was working a male role. I was doing all this stuff. And by all means, had I not gone back to my doctor and told them everything I did, this past year about everything I went through, I would have been paraded around as a successful child transition.
Yeah, and I wasn't. Yeah, here's one more. I'm gonna
room. Gender affirming care does not ruin the lives of children, it saves them, and the people who introduce and support this legislation know that. The movement to legislate against the inclusion of trans people and against life-saving healthcare for transgender children is the first step in the concerted, organized, and explicit effort to eradicate and exterminate transgender people, and it will certainly not be the last. They know that the introduction and passing of the bills like these will kill trans people, including children, and that is their goal. It is the initiation of the solution of what fascists are calling, and I kid you not, the transgender question. Let that sink in. Room. Gender affirming care does not ruin the lives of children, it saves them, and the people who introduce and support this legislation know that. The movement to legislate against the inclusion of trans people and against life-saving healthcare for transgender children is the first step in the concerted, organized, and explicit effort.
And there's one more.
Person is mentally well.
And
no,
the ability to define what consent means to them.
Oh, here.
The adolescent.
Is that? This is the picture of mental health, right?
These are when I saw that person with the pink rooster haircut. I hate to admit it, but my first thought was that person looked like the one federal employee who was stealing suitcases. I was like, did they let him out, and did he get hair? But that is how you talk. That is how you talk when you need to make people afraid and need them to take drastic measures. That is how cult leaders talk when they're about to have their big moment of action of all drinking the Kool-Aid. That is not how a healthy individual who actually cares about mental health and medical care for people talks. That is not how you talk. That is how you actively get children to have suicidal ideation, by talking like that, by making them afraid. And it is, it genuinely upsets me, because what are you doing to these children by saying that?
Look at this child, 13 years old.
That does not look like a 13-year-old.
Yeah,
That looks
there's so
like a
many.
9-year-old. Oh my god.
Yeah, I want to play. Then I have two more right here. Oh, here. Tell me you're mentally unstable without telling me you're mentally unstable.
Oh, I'm scared.
I would ask that the committee members give me their full attention and stay off their phones. I've been here about 10 hours, and I would just really ask for your respect. My name is Natasha D. Raudio, and I've lived in Wisconsin all of my 27 years of life. I'm a proud transsexual woman, and I vehemently oppose any trans healthcare ban put forth in this body, including AB 465. I grew up on the shores of Lake Superior, outside a small town of 600 people most people have probably never heard of, called Brule, Wisconsin. My entire upbringing, I was told by my rural community, my family, and even my own mother, that there is something wrong with that. Because my femininity poured out of me and I couldn't hide it. I learned to hide it within deep depression, suicidal thoughts, and self-medicating with toxic addictions that nearly took every single thing away from me. I was strong enough to escape my negative thoughts and behaviors, as well as bigoted environments, and earn my degree at UW-Madison School of Business. I continue to reside in Madison today, where I've been able to safely transition, but not before the self-hatred that was projected onto me by bigots nearly destroyed me.
That just sounds like a boy who wanted to be feminine.
Yep.
That
and
just
notice,
sounds
like, all those comorbidities. My goodness.
Yeah, well, there's that, but also that just sounds like a boy who maybe wanted to play dress up and play with dolls and got that yelled out of him. And then immediately he is essentially fulfilling the most sexist stereotype of, oh, if I was feminine as a child, that must mean I'm actually a woman. Because God forbid a man be feminine.
Yeah.
Like it is based on the most stringent gender roles.
And look at all that, like anxiety, depression, addictions, all of this. And look at it, and still went to Madison, got a degree. That is true. That's amazing with all that. But so many different comorbidities, and he will go on to talk about them. But he says, I've ever been. Does this look like I am so happy now? No.
But it's just like, okay, I wonder, like, looking back at that, if his family had just accepted him as like a feminine male, would this person be at this place? I don't think they would, frankly.
Yeah, exactly. I agree that if there was, and who knows, like there's so many things that could have been going on, but then it's just
from the little piece I have that was given to me right here.
Yeah, he's saying, I had a traumatic life and I experienced so much pain, and then I got testosterone, and now it's I've had surgeries, and what I believe is that what he believes is that if I would have had this sooner and I could look more like
it is the rose-tinted glasses I think I brought up very near the beginning of the podcast. It is the rose-tinted glasses of looking back and wanting to almost relive vicariously through the kids going through the system now of, well, I didn't have this, and I think I would have been happier if I got it. You don't know if you would have been happier if you got it. Your life could have gone completely different, a worse course. You don't know that. But it is, instead of accepting your past that you lived through and you survived and you made it to where you are with all your accomplishments, instead of doing that, is trying to view like the past with these rose-tinted nostalgia glasses of just, if only I had done this at this age, you know? Then everything would be better.
No, it's
sad. It's sad that someone is focused that much on, you know, essentially what their childhood could have been like.
My son has known this girl since preschool and knew her prior to transition. And my 7-year-old child has had zero confusion. Regardless of the genitalia that she was born with. I ask you now to stop second-guessing parents, doctors, psychiatrists, and even my 7-year-old. We know who our kids are.
7-year-olds
and we
believe
need
all kind of
the
things.
freedom to help them express it. Thank you.
Do we have any
Okay.
questions for?
That is
basically
7-year-olds
what
is 7-year-olds is a group that I am familiar with working with, and they believe all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And they are very easy to essentially convince on topics that they don't have the mental processing, to truly have like a deep understanding of. And they're great. At that age, they're great. They're fun. They understand a lot. However, they just are not like mature enough to understand the full comprehension of that.
Yeah, and she was trying to say, well, my son's in love with, trans, taking this opportunity to, basically virtue signal, like in some way. I mean, the crazy in her eyes, I could see from a mile away. I don't know what's.
Feel it. No, but saying my literal child who still believes in Santa Claus believes this maybe isn't an argument. Saying that my child.
It's those trans housing by
It is. And it's just like my child who still thinks Santa is real. If they believe in this thing, this is clearly sound evidence that you, an adult with a functioning brain in reality, should also believe in this thing.
These are kids who eat their boogers and don't wipe, okay? They don't know how to wipe themselves, and they eat their boogers and believe in Santa.
This is the age of children that I have to ask if they have used water when they shower. Like
yes. You work at a camp, the pretend showers.
I've worked with kids in like multiple capacities at different jobs, and like, listen, all I'm saying is if it's a child that you have to ask them things like, if they believe in Santa, you have to remind them to use water when they go into the shower, and like all of these other things, and they put on their clothes inside out half the time. Still, maybe not the best judgment of like what we're doing.
They'll eat paste, or if something is pink and it looks good, they just can't help it. Like if it's slime, they're gonna taste it a little. I mean, they'll eat it. You can, these are kids. We've raised them. Like I even my kid who's 11. It's like, did you brush your teeth? Ugh, I don't want to brush my teeth. They'd go a long time without brushing teeth. And that's sad to say. They don't want to make these hard decisions, but you give them this life-changing decision and they can make it. Or my kid, I trust my kid's judgment. This is all crazy talk. You don't trust your kid's judgment on this.
It's one of those things where, like, if I would have gone, to any parent at like 14 and gone to them and gone, you know what? I want to get my entire back tattooed and my neck. And I think you should trust my judgment, because I definitely think some fine line floral work is going to look great. You would have been like, oh, hell no.
Yes.
Absolutely not.
Yes.
Stuff like that. People get upset with me they've gotten upset with me in the past when I've compared transitioning to tattoos. But as someone who, fun fact, has both, my tattoo artists seem to care a whole lot more about like the longevity and how this would look in 10 years than the doctors did in hindsight. Like, just saying.
The only reason why that comparison may be a little not apt is a tattoo is far less deal than what. So the fact that you have to have a consent to get a tattoo, you have to have consent. I don't know if you to apply sunscreen to someone that's not your child. You can't at my school. I bet at your camp, if there's not a written notice, you're like, I can't put this sunscreen on you, or I can't give you a Tylenol. I don't have written notice.
Yep, we have to. I know for a fact that every job I've worked at with kids, if it's not on file, you have to call mom and dad about stuff like giving them Tylenol when they're not feeling good, or a cough drop even.
Yeah.
And it's just stuff like that where it's like, okay, so it is just the thing of like trusting even like a teenager's judgment. There are some things that like a teenager can decide to do. Sterilizing themselves should not be on that list.
There are very few things. I have 3 teenagers right now. But there are very few things. Like they do the things that teenagers do. They just, and that's just kind of part of the makeup. Like
that is, kids
know
they need
serious repercussions, or they would drink. They would drink.
Yeah.
You have to pound things home in them because those aren't instinctual yet.
And how kind of how this manifests is, so children need boundaries. They need boundaries, but what they also need is safe ways to press against those boundaries and kind of explore in ways that aren't going to be like detrimental to them.
Yes.
So, it's one of those things where like, okay, kids angry, throwing rocks. Okay, well, you can't throw rocks where you are, because that's the boundary they're pressing against, is saying no. But it's like, okay, if you need to get anger out, we can go to this other way, or we can throw rocks into the forest. We can figure something out. Like the boundary is set that you cannot do something that's going to hurt someone, but we can find another way for you to express these emotions. But it's with a lot of stuff, and the boundaries, of course, change as a kid ages, and it changes sometimes if you're like a parent, which I would assume it would change per kid.
Yeah,
but
it's some kids you can trust a little bit more, all of that. But no, even the kid who is, you think, oh, that kid every once in a while, like they make a bad call, they make a bad decision.
Well, it's the thing of like, oh, I always got, oh, you're so mature for your age. You're such an old soul. And it's like, it doesn't matter how much of an old soul you thought I was. I was 16. Why did you listen to me?
And and what I think with the future of this is, and I know because I said, and it's getting late, but with the future is, I think that there's been a lot of problems because they have waited in a lot of cases till maybe 16, and then it's sort of getting 15, 13, and I think that they're just pushing these boundaries. Well, maybe if we start at 10, maybe if we even start before they hit puberty, and then they'll pass more, and if they can pass more, we're not going to have a detransitioner problem. They're getting into John Money territory now. They're getting into John Money territory where let's start it when they're babies. Let's start it when they're young. And guess what? It didn't.
There was a video that said kids know they're trans in the womb.
Yeah.
From like an actual hospital. I can't remember a hospital. So there was a video, and that got wiped off the internet real fast.
I think Chris Elston, Billboard Chris, is the one that exposed that. He found the video, and I forget which system, but he's the one that kind of went viral with that they know in the womb. And was that wasn't Chicago, was it? Was that
it CHOP? Was it the
CHOP?
Cincinnati CHOP?
I'm not sure though. I don't want to say
it was one. I know it was one of the eastern ones.
Okay.
I know it was over in that region, like the
that's apropos.
Like it was somewhere over there. I can't remember if it was like Boston's or CHOP, but it was. I think it was.
Well, it was one like it. There's several that have been sort of exposed, and and that was one of them. And they took that video, but when the video of the prophet that. I've seen kids in the womb. I've seen toddlers. Kids just know these things.
Kids just know. There is what is it? It's I'm forgetting what the actual like term for it is, but it's the picture of the plane from one of the world wars. It's like the plane diagram with all the holes on it, and those were the planes that made it back. And so they're like, okay, well, we need to reinforce where the holes are, because the ones that got hit there didn't make it back. I'm forgetting what the like fallacy you're saying is, but it's essentially that kids know who they are until they don't.
Yes.
And then you can brush those ones aside.
Kids don't know who they are. That's
You know,
just not.
It's one of those things where it's like kids. That is such a meaningless line. Kids know who they are until they don't. Ask any emo kid from the 2000s how many of them are still doing that.
Yeah, I mean, little kids in particular, they don't know who they are at all. They get, you as an adult, as a parent, you have some insight into who they are more than they do. But they learn to know who they are.
Call the parent when the kid is having issues at like a camp or a daycare or anything like this. That's why you call the parent, because the parent normally has insight into the kid's behavior and the best way to deal with that.
Well, and there's so since this will be the last thing, because we have to get to bed. But on this topic, because I wanted to show, I thought this was another interesting take here. So let me see. I'll move it to add to stage. Okay. Because listen, she's going to talk about consent.
It is my firm belief that young people should have the decision-making power over their bodies and have the ability to define what consent means to them. The adolescence years are a period of significant change and self-discovery, during which young individuals deserve to be supported and provided with gender-affirming medical treatment. It is my firm belief that young people should have the decision-making power over their body.
What she's talking about, consent.
Consent for children looks like stuff essentially teaching like your body is your space. Do not let other people into it. If you know, stuff like that. Like, for example, example that I've done at all my jobs is like, do you want a high five? If you say no, cool, I'm going to respect that decision. Stuff like that. That is like consent for children. That's teaching them that like no one should be, doing things that are unsafe to you. That is consent for children. It is not, okay, you're going to get to take these drugs that are going to completely impair your sexual function, worsen your mental health, and you will never be able to fully understand the consequences of until you reach adulthood.
And I think that most parents think that when schools say we're going to teach your kids about consent, they imagine it's going to be bad touches, good touches.
That's what it was when I was in school still, even.
That's not what it is anymore. Now with comprehensive sexuality education, there are scenarios for first graders where teachers put 4 kids together, 2 girls, 2 boys, and they imagine someone is touched your body part, touched a private part without it. What do you say? And they talk it through and they learn to forgive, all of that. It was really weird situations, but they talk about your ability to give consent, that even your parents can't tell you to do things. And I'm talking like you have the right to your identity. Your parents can't tell you your identity. And now let's explore your identity, and you get to decide, about touching, good touches, bad touches. But by the time they're in 6th grade, they start talking about here's puberty blockers. That's something that you could have, maybe even 4th grade sometimes with this. And they talk about condoms, all of that stuff. And parents don't know that they're starting to talk to them about sexual consent, and that they can consent, even though in most states you can't, because if you're engaging in that and you're underage, then that's illegal. But they're teaching very young kids that they can start to give consent sexually at that young age. And I believe it's priming them up for adult child
And it is one of those things where it's like, not there needs to be a healthy boundary between like, okay, here's good touch, bad touch, here's like body parts and how they function, and like health things regarding to like periods and stuff like that. That is what I think parents are expecting, because that is like reasonable.
And separate them by sex, because you don't, you don't put 10-year-old girls with 10-year-old boys and start talking about periods, because those boys are going to tease relentlessly. The girls are going to be embarrassed and shy, and nobody wants that. Nobody, my kids, they would not want to go into something where they're going to talk about sweating and body odor and periods and getting boys around when they're like preteens. And
even doing that, and like when you go over like anatomy too, it's one of those things where like I know at the school I went to, they separated us by sex, and even they even for like the anatomy lesson of like, okay, well, here's like the physical, body parts, and here's kind of what they do. You guys are about to go through puberty, all that spiel. Please wear deodorant, that whole thing. But
boys around, I've been in the classroom as substitute teacher and volunteer. The boys, they're snickering, and the whole day they're going to make lewd comments. I promise you, the entire day those boys are they're going to be a little. Well,
they think it's hilarious, and like they're laughing about it. At least they're making, I guess, the best of an awkward situation. But like, you don't need to subject everyone else in the class to that, like all the girls.
Yeah, and they're boys, and as they get older, they have the testosterone, and they're just raging hormones. Though it just separate them, but you can't do that anymore, Luka. They do not want you to separate. In public schools, they're not going to separate, because you never know. You don't know what a woman is. So how
I know for my public school, this was in high school, given it, but my like public school like health and education class or whatever, that was not separated. However, that class was also a lot less focused. We spent a lot more time discussing like the consequences of drugs and all the different kinds of drugs in that class than we ever did on sex. So like not
and that's
probably feel that was not separated.
Appropriate, because in a lot of, and especially a lot of public schools in the city of Milwaukee and stuff, in these schools, they're just trying to keep kids from getting hurt.
That was the thing. It was much more just like pure informational stuff.
Their problem is a whole other woke problem. The problem in a lot of these schools is restorative justice. Meaning they're absolutely, the teachers have zero tools in their toolbox to handle kids that are violent, that are lashing out, that are disruptive. There's nothing they can do. They cannot be suspended. They can no longer even be sent to the principal's office. So
that's insane to me, because I've worked places where I don't think we call it restorative justice, but where it is essentially like restorative. Essentially restorative in the sense that like you figure out, you like talk to the kids, you figure out a solution, then you talk to them together, and then the person who did wrong, the restorative part there is that they have to come up with a solution on how they're going to fix things. Like, that is actual restoring, because they are forced to fix what they did to the community. And it's one of those things where it's hard to like reconcile. I don't want that kind of getting lumped in with like the restorative justice you see like on these full-scale public school systems where you have kids hurling chairs at teachers' heads.
And don't you notice that something good gets warped and turned? Because what you're saying, like ideally, the concept is good, and then it gets warped into where restorative justice now is turned into that.
Oh, it's frozen a little bit.
freezing. That's probably a sign time to go. But we're just a lot of things even the kind of some of the sex education parts, because we're trying to solve problems where there's maybe there are homes where there's a one parent and mom has two jobs and is just trying to get by, and that kid isn't getting it. They need to learn about menstruation and all of this. So I get it. I think a lot of this stuff started in a good place, and then it got captured by activists who try and, they try and put in the agenda, like, oh, we really need to talk about gender identity in, a kindergarten sexuality class. Like, none of these things belong together. You don't need to teach kids what we would have learned in 5th grade. You don't need to talk to kindergartners about their period. That's scary.
You do not have to talk to kindergartners about their period.
You're going to talk to a 5-year-old saying one day you're going to bleed out of. They're going to go home. They're going to not be able to sleep.
They will think they are going to die if you talk to them about it.
They're not ready. And you might be creating problems, anxiety in a girl. Maybe you're now giving her anxiety, thinking, I don't want that to happen. I don't want
it. Especially with how it's described nowadays. I'm going to be real. Like, if I were a little kid and I heard that and how it's talked about, I would be terrified. And I already did not have good experiences surrounding it when it came to like, everything going on in my life and like education about it and all that stuff. So like, I can't imagine trying to tell like a really small child about that and them then not going, I will do anything at all costs to avoid this terrible thing that you just described to me.
So maybe that's an interesting part where there's so much information that when girls, for boys find about puberty, it's like, yeah, awkward stage. There's I don't want to get banned, but some of the things that happen, it's not too bad. But for girls, it's like you're going to go breasts. It's like, oh my God, then one day you'll have baby. It's there's a lot of things.
I think
girl.
I think you talked about that. I also grew up during a very weird part in the internet where it was almost like you couldn't acknowledge that your cycle will cause mood changes because that is seen as like you being over emotional, to the point where I didn't even know that it is completely normal to have days like that you just like your mood shifts with your cycle. I didn't know that because the entire like kind of culture around me at the time was you can't let it affect you. You're not over emotional. You got to like girl boss through it. And it was just like, I can't imagine what it would be like today in today's culture, the amount of like twisted information out there.
And what about today's culture talking about how women are traumatized, victimized, all that? We're just, it's just terrible to be a woman. You're not going to get paid as much. It's just, which it's not, okay. It's just not true. It's not terrible to be a woman. It's not.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where I think probably like that kind of stuff did subconsciously get to me as well. I would say probably not as deeply as, some of the probably other people in my generation or even now, simply because my like,
it's worse now. I think
it's worse now, but also I happened to be like, when I was really like watching YouTube all the time because I was depressed, I was like, it was the middle of like the Gamergate era where all that was going on. So there was, I feel like I consumed enough back and forth there with all that chaos that it at least like, introduced me to the concept of other concepts. It didn't take me to the whole trans thing, but it
girl. It was awesome to be a girl. Like it was great. There was like all like, it was fun. I wouldn't want to be a boy. No way. And that the going through the 80s and 90s, it's it's unfortunate because I and it wasn't the girl boss either. It was the Princess Leia in some ways. Then you have when you think of Molly Ringwald, Princess Leia, then you get to just like there was like enough there. There was always a strong heroine, you know, where Indiana Jones, and she's strong. It's not like these women were weak. Every female counterpart was like a badass, strong woman. But there was a dude too, and he was badass and strong. And now it's the guy is a wimp. He's a total soy boy, and I am woman, hear me roar. That isn't reflective of what women really want. You want a partner, but you don't want some weak guy that's just like he's a knuckle dragger, and you're just and you're so super strong. What my kids, my girls always kind of get irritated with me because I'm like, I can't watch this movie where this 90-pound woman is beating up these men and, like Captain Marvel, and we're supposed to think that that's real. Like, and I'm like,
hey, at least in that one, they give her the excuse of like, okay, she has superpowers.
Yeah, she has every power. She has every
power. At least there you have that. And it's not some of the, I'm trying to think of, I can't think of the other ones where it's like.
I'm not a big Captain Marvel fan. I don't like
I'm not huge into, fun fact, I like don't really watch TV or movies. There is a movie studio, like I like Studio Ghibli movies. And funny enough, those all have very, like all their protagonists tend to be young women and girls. Except they're done in a way where they are like these are beautiful movies, and they're done in a way where like the director purposely is like, I want to show girls that they can have like a strong character, and these girls are strong in character and will and like value, and they do such amazing stuff without having to like, I don't know, tear down any of the other characters to make the other characters seem dumb.
Yes,
they're all just very full-fledged characters in their own right.
Raise the women up. You don't need to tear women down to raise women up, and you don't need to tear men down and make them just imbeciles to raise women up. And they also, they don't have to be like evil and just terrible, or they're weak and they're just like they're there and they're, I don't know, they're eye candy, but they're dumb. I trying to think like some more there. I can't remember right now, but there have been some movies where I thought they did a good job where the female character, I don't want to watch a weak woman either. I just want to watch something normal. I want to watch something that's real, like a strong, good woman, and she can be feminine too, and she doesn't have to have the ability to beat up every man, and she doesn't have to.
That is why I like Studio Ghibli. They're animated, but they're very pretty and very lovely music, lovely
and strong, and they can they can kick some butt, but it doesn't mean that they're like. But I think that and I was a huge, like I would say, like Black Widow. I loved Black Widow. One of my favorite. I was big into the MCU before. Now that it's the MCU now, every character is a woman.
I have not. That is one thing, and it's I've had people in my life throughout the years who have been like, we need to sit down and watch all of the MCU, and I have been like, I am sorry, that is not happening.
Oh, I cried hysterically by the time I got to the end of the series. That one, I was a big into the original MCU, and since they've started doing the new stuff, it's not the same.
I've seen Guardians of the Galaxy and Deadpool, and I'm content with those.
I love Guardians of the Galaxy, and the third one was really good too. I thought that was so good. I liked it. So, but yeah, now we rewatch them, but the new ones aren't as good, just like with the Star Wars. But it's 11 o'clock, so it's been a great conversation. But I would recommend. I wouldn't take. I do like that. And when you get to Endgame, oh man, I was crying. I was crying. It was good, and I obviously with my kids. It wasn't something I wanted to start watching, but my son was Iron. All my kids were big fans, and you eventually you get into it, and but it was a good story arc. It was a good hero's journey, and they did it right, and they ended it so well. And then they thought, let's go woke, and then just like with Disney, loved Disney stuff, and I'm just, the formula, how to write good stories, and I think that maybe if they wrote good, don't you feel? I feel like it's like our whole society is sick right now, so our movies are sick, so our pop culture is sick, and if the movies start to get better, I almost think it would be a sign that things are moving in a better direction. But
Yeah.
All right. Well, have a good night. I know
So
I'm going to go.
The culture discussion is another one that can last for like 2 hours, so I don't think we should.
That would be fun. A whole cultural discussion. Just have fun. Like, I'm a big Nerdrotic fan. Sometimes I will listen.
Yeah, I watch. I think I've mentioned before that one of the podcasts I listen to fairly consistently is the Lotus Eater guys, and they do they do some like culture stuff, and so that is something I've been paying attention to for a while.
Have you ever heard of the drinker? Oh, is he funny? And the last name drinker, and he'll watch a movie and he's hilarious too, and he's another kind of culture. There's a couple of them that I watch. It's good, like lighter stuff. Yeah, and they're still making fun of woke, but it's not political, so it's a little more fun. And the way these guys are all like laughing at everything. I'll end with the Candace Owens meme my daughter showed me today, where there's some person saying, I'm a non-binary, this, that, and my life is tragic. And what do you say? You're erasing me.
Was it to get a helmet?
Life is hard. Get a helmet. I'm too pregnant for this. So I love it. Life is hard. Get a helmet. That's what. But I'm not feeling compassionate. All right. Bye, Luka. This was great.
Bye. It was nice chatting with you.
Yes, it was nice. Thank you.
Thank you.